don't have to agree with what you are saying. And in fact, the viewpoint that you're presenting may actually be unusual, maybe different, and may in fact even be unpopular. But what really matters is the logic with which you present it, the development of that logic, and the strength of that logic. So don't shy away from saying something that you think might not go over well with someone, because we're here to have those difficult conversations. And the way that we do that is with a basis of understanding of Gurbani, but at the same time promoting these ideas of critical thinking, because until we start to question for each opening statement, I believe, is a minute. So you get 1 minute for your response, so you'll get a bell at 1 minute. And then when it comes to the actual core content here, where we're doing the discussion and answering questions, we're not going to put limits on you guys at that point. And then closing statements, when it comes to that point, which again, I forgot to mention, at the very end of this, we will have, again, randomly chosen order for closing statements. There will be no responses to closing statements. That will be a 90-second statement that you get. Again, a bell then at 1.5 minutes, with the hope that you wrap up shortly thereafter if you're still going. And then whenever I get the green light, we will go ahead and get started. And then one more thing. We're good? Okay, wonderful. All right, so as our participants are well aware, the focus and the topic for the debate this year is the Sikh way of life and the Sikh Rehat Maryada. It is both a good thing and a bad thing that you don't get necessarily certain references or resources given to you, and it's really kind of an open forum for you to find whatever you think may pertain or relate to this topic. I'm certainly going to keep our focus on the Rehat Maryada, but still try to get some conversation going about things that may be somewhat peripheral but still relevant. So with that being said, we will start with our first opening statement that will be given by Gursnekar, and response will be by Gurjot Singh. And I will also just say, when you guys start your opening statement, if everyone wants to start with a fateh with their each opening statement and their response, after we've done the initial fateh, don't feel the need to do fateh every time you speak. We will just assume that you have given your fateh for the remainder of the debate until you finish your closing statement. All right, you can go ahead whenever you're ready.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. A code of conduct, present everywhere. Schools, countries, religions. A code of conduct is the base for any group or organization because it provides structure for people. When Muslims attempted to convert Sikhs to Islam, Sikhs stuck to Sikhism and the Rehat Maryada. When Hindus attempted to assimilate with Sikhs and wipe out Sikh identity, Sikhs stuck to the Rehat Maryada and kept their caste and other identifying factors to resist. Without the Rehat Maryada, Sikhs would be gone. They would have met the fate of other faiths that are basically unknown today because they were obliterated. Sure, it may be difficult to follow, but who said life is easy? Guru Nanak said, Jato prem kalan ka chao, sirdar tali gali mere ao. Guru Nanak says, step into the court of love with your head in your hand. Though the rehet is very important, it is not at all perfect. According to the Reth Maryada, I am not considered a Sikh. Many of us in this room may not be considered a Sikh. With a world that changes constantly, is there an amendment process for new thoughts or changes? What about the leaders that make these decisions? How are they even chosen? What are their qualifications? Is there diversity? The Jathedars are appointed, not elected. Why is it that I need more training to do an EKG than the Jathedars do in order to be a leader of all the Sikhs? I had to do competency checks, written tests, and have multiple prerequisite courses. What are the qualifications needed to become a Jathedar? Political connections, popularity, and overall just knowing the right people. Though changes need to be made, the Rehet Maryada is an important part of preserving the Panth as we know today. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Gurjot Singh, you can go ahead.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you, Gursname. So, can you elaborate on the point where you stated in the beginning that Sikhs use the Rehet Maryada when they were being forcibly converted to Islam and they used the Rehet Maryada in order to stay true to their values? Can you elaborate on that point, please?
Yeah, so Sikhs kept their identity by following the Rehet Maryada. So, for example, when Hindus tried to assimilate into Sikhs, the Sikhs kept their case, wore a turban to keep with the Sikh faith. And it kind of just helped them stay on track.
And this was according to the Rehet Maryada, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so do you have like is this like during the 1700s, 1700s, 1600s? Like this is like during the time of the Gurus, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Rehet Maryada actually wasn't officially drafted until the 1930s. This was originally, it was based off the 52 hukams that were given by Guru Gobind Singh Sahib. So they actually didn't take account the Rehet Maryada. They took account the values that were expressed in the Rehet Maryada. The Rehet Maryada wasn't actually incorporated until 1933. So how can you say that they used the Rehet Maryada when they were being forced to forcibly convert into Hinduism or Islam?
Okay, that's a good point. But even in the future, even now, Sikhs that stay to their identity, it helps them.
So you're saying that they use the values represented in the Rehet Maryada, but not the actual Rehet Maryada, which wasn't officially a thing when in this time frame that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you talk about changes that need to be made, can you elaborate on some of those changes? Like I think you mentioned diversity. I think you mentioned gender inequality or something. Can you elaborate on those, please?
Yeah. So changes that need to be made. Sorry, give me a second.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Rehet Maryada has a lot of gender-specific language.
Right.
So, for example, in it says, a Sikh's daughter must be married to a Sikh, but it has no reference to a son. Another example, it says that a baptized ought to get his wife also baptized. So these are just a few examples of gender-specific language that are written in the Rehet Maryada. Yeah. So I think that should be changed because what if you're a homosexual? What if you're gender fluid? Things like that.
Yeah, I agree. The Rehet Maryada should be, there should be a way to amend or change some parts of the Rehet Maryada to incorporate diversity or new modern issues.
Yeah, additionally, I feel like a lot of people aren't really educated on this. Before this, I wasn't really educated on this. I asked my parents, they weren't really educated on this. I feel like education in gurdwaras, Sikh camps, calls to school, anything like that could be beneficial, as well as even having a system. Like I said in my statement, the Jathedars, there's not really any specific qualifications for them. An example of a way we could fix that is in the United States, there's kind of a federal system. Right. So people elect representatives, maybe different places like the United States, Southern United States, Western United States, just different portions, maybe Canada, different portions of Canada could elect representatives that could maybe represent a community to go into the Sarbat Khalsa.
Correct. Thank you.
And so kind of going off of what Gursneh mentioned in her opening statement, and again, this is open for anybody at this point. One of the things she mentions is that the Rehet Maryada is not necessarily very easy to follow. So I ask you this, why? why is it not very easy to follow?
Because
to me, it looks like there's a simple, fairly straightforward set of rules. It's only a few pages long. It's not incredibly extensive. Why do we find it to be so tough?
I think because there's no repercussions if you break or don't follow any aspects of the Red Mirada. It's not actually legal framework. It's just a set of rules placed by the SGPC. There should be, I believe that there should be repercussions or some sort of, some repercussions that should be enacted if a Sikh or an Amritdhari does not follow the way of life of a Sikh as represented in the Sikh Red Mirada. There's no legal framework. That's my point.
Okay, Sahajgar.
I do believe there are repercussions. I know, have you heard of Tankai? I think that's how you say it. That is the punishment that someone gets if they don't follow the Rahat Maryada. Right. But I do agree that it is not a very legal framework, and it is not in a very, well, of course, I've really read translations, but I don't believe that it's in very professional language, and I really don't believe that issues, like, it doesn't really pertain to issues today because modern technology has just created experiences that Sikhs feel experience today that were not a thing back then.
Right. It's also not directly written by the Gurus. It was SGPC, correct? It reflects the 52 hukams written by Guru Gobind Singh, but it's not a direct wording from the Gurus themselves.
Speaking of repercussions, I don't think repercussions is the right choice of language because I feel like Sikhism is all about inclusivity. Gurbani always talks about inclusivity. I feel like adding repercussions to some minor things such as, I mean, not that it's very minor, but I don't think cutting your hair should have a super repercussion. I think Sikhism is all about inclusivity. And also, to answer the moderator's question, I think something is modern world distractions, which kind of drifts us away from following the Rahat Maryada. For example, in the Rahat Maryada, it says you're not allowed to have piercings. A lot of people have piercings, especially here in the United States, a lot of people have piercings. And I think things like that, that's something small, but I think things like that kind of drift you away from following the Rahat Maryada. And also, if the Sangat around you, such as I go to school, and I see people doing all this stuff, it makes me think like, oh, I should do it too. Also, if you don't know the why of something, why would you do it? Like if I'm in chemistry class and I'm wearing goggles and I didn't know that it's because chemicals can splash in my eye, then one day I'll not wear goggles and be like, what's the point?
Okay. Divakar?
I think that the Red Maryada should be updated to current status. As they said, there's a lot of things like where it says you can only marry another Sikh. I think that there's a lot of things that it does have that could be updated, but there's also the simple code of conducts that you could follow, like the 5Ks, the Kish, the Ganga, the Kada, the Kachera, the simple things that you can follow in it.
This has been referenced a couple of times, and I'm just curious to know your interpretation of it, where it does say that the daughter of a Sikh should marry a Sikh. Do we think that that leaves the room for the son of a Sikh being able to marry outside of the Sikh faith?
I do think that in that time it was implied that a son of a Sikh would marry a daughter of a Sikh. However, I do agree that it is very gender-specific language, and I honestly don't think that comes from the religion. I think it comes from the culture, and obviously at that time, like feminism, these kinds of things, it wasn't a really big thing that was talked about, especially in like Punjab. And so I do believe that, like, I agree, it should be updated. And I know Gurjot said that it wasn't like created by the Gurus, but that is a system that Guru Gobind Singh Ji himself has installed, that where Sikhs are able to create their own decisions, and that's with the Gurmata. So I don't think that that really takes away from its credibility.
Okay, that's fair. So now let me ask you something that's been brought up. So Gursnikar mentioned that, you know, there shouldn't be punishments for simple things like cutting your hair. On the other hand, Divakar mentioned, hey, we should at least follow the simple rules like keeping your hair. Do we think that keeping hair in Sikhi is something that should be optional? Is it a requirement? Is it a big deal, or is it not?
I think if you want to be Amritdhari, if you want to be the way Guru said a Sikh should be, you should have the requirement to keep hair. But that's not saying anyone without hair is a bad Sikh or a good Sikh. I know a whole bunch of people who say don't keep their hair, and they're much better Sikhs than I am. So you can not have your hair, you can not have your kids, and still have the Sikh values, Sikh ideologies, be a good Sikh in a sense. But I think in order to be an Amritdhari, in order to be the Sikh, a proper Sikh, the way the Gurus meant you do need to keep your case, yes.
I think it's not a punishment if you do cut your hair, but it's a good thing if you keep it because it's your identity. Keeping your hair is just the Sikh identity, and that's how people know who we are. If they see us with a turban or if they see us with long hair, they're like, oh, they're Sikh, and it helps us. It's our sense of self, and it's like a deeper understanding to Sikhism. And when someone comes up to you and they're like, why don't you cut your hair? You tell them, I didn't cut my hair because it's part of my identity. So I think keeping your hair is a huge part because it's your identity. It's why you're Sikh.
I agree with Diva on the identity part, but also I think it depends what brings you closer to the Guru. If me saying, oh, I'm going to cut my hair, and I think, oh, that will bring me on the path closer to the Guru, great. That's great. It's all about what I personally think. If I think, oh, not cutting my hair will bring me closer to the Guru, that's what Guru Gobind Singh Ji said, then great, I did that. I think it all depends on the path that you take that brings you personally to the Guru.
I agree. Like if you keep your hair but don't follow any of the teachings of the Guru, any of the teachings of Sikhi outlined in Guru Granth Sahib, then you're not a good Sikh the way the Guru told you should be.
Honestly, I think this situation extends much further beyond cutting your hair. Like being a Sikh, like the core ideals, like values of a Sikh is being able to, follow the Panch Kakar, have good karam, and do your nitnem. Like those are like the 3 golden rules, right? I think it is a holistic process. So I think that personally having these conversations on whether or not to cut your hair, whether or not to do this, tiny things like this, I do feel it is a bit arbitrary because like my fellow contestants have stated, you can be a Sikh without cutting your hair, with cutting your hair. I think the Panth has bigger issues to focus on rather than whether or not to cut your hair.
I think it's important to have discussions like that because for me personally, I've never gone to India. I've never been to Punjab. But me in my everyday life, something that I can relate to my fellow peers on is my hair. We can relate, we all go to school in Texas, in Plano, Texas per se, or North Texas, and something that we relate on is hair. That could be a big thing for me and my peers, which it is. And I think having conversations like that, even if it's small, I think it's important to have.
Okay. I'm going to take a pause here so that we can move on to the next opening statement because I think we're bringing up a lot of conversation topics that we're going to continue to touch on. But let's just move on to the next opening statement. That will be given by Sahajkar, and the response will be given by Divakar. And also, just a quick aside, when we're doing our response, I love the back and forth, but let's try to keep the response a cohesive thought from the person who's giving the response. And then when you're done with that, feel free to ask questions of each other, and I will help stimulate that conversation as well. All right, go ahead, Sajgar.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Rahni rahe soi Sikh mera, var Thakur main uska chehra. The Raat Maryada, otherwise known as the Sikh Code of Conduct, was created in 1933 to help create a Sikh rules and regulations for the Sikh way of life. Now, in my personal context, I use the Raat Maryada to help me keep in harmony with the Almighty. In a world where children are faced with bad influences at every step of their life, I use the Raat Maryada to help me maintain my Sikh identity, and not only through my unshorn hair and my dastar, but also through my ideals and values. Now, in a Panthic setting, I believe that the influences of the Raat Maryada go much further beyond what Bani to read in the morning. I do believe that Raat Maryada was created from a Gurmata, and a Gurmata is what it encourages. Just the basic ideals that even if you and I disagree, we are Sikhs under one Guru and Sikhs under one Panth, and thus we follow the rules of the Panth. Now, as for why some Sikhs deviate from the Raat Maryada, I do believe that it is important to remember that this was created in 1933, a time whose cultural and political context is very hard to understand. This creates a disconnect between the experiences of the newer generation and the ideals of the Raat Maryada, both of which are valid. And I believe that the only way to really fix this is to host another Gurmata to revise and update the Raat Maryada. I do believe that we need to understand the challenges and the experiences that Sikhs face today in order to give them a resource instead of a restriction. And lastly, for Sarbat da Pala, it is true that Langar and Seva, these things are Sarbat da Pala. However, it is also true that you must be able to take a stand at the right time. which in often cases can be equivalent to death, as we've seen in Sikh history. And so I believe that ensuring the prosperity of others cannot only be achieved through peaceful means, especially if the intention of the oppressor is not to remain peaceful. And thus, I believe that the way of the Sant Sipahi is the way of the Sikh, and that is what the Raat Maryada should reflect.
right.
Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you, Sahajgar, and now Divakar.
Vaheguru Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I would like to go off of Sahaj's point where why would we stray away from the Sikh way of life. I think a main point is what she did mention, that we do follow the 5Ks, but there's also stuff that deflects it, like ego, anger, greed, lust, and engaging in selfless service. Those are main things not only for Sikhism, but just in regular life that could direct someone away. And just because it's laid out in Sikh Raat Maryada doesn't mean it's laid out everywhere. Sikhs don't only face those challenges, but they also face challenges like economic pressures just from cultural, social pressures and personal struggles. And they might just feel disillusioned with the fact of their teachings. And a way that I think that we could improve that is just education. Learning resources on Sikhism, including the Sikh Raat Maryada and Gurbani. Before this discussion topic, I didn't know about the Sikh Raat Maryada. I didn't know that, there are so many rules that you should follow, but learning more about it, it just made me have a deeper connection, which is why I think education is a really important role.
All right, anyone else have some thoughts before I ask them questions based on this? So let me ask you kind of something that has been brought up, but I want to make it a little bit more personal to you. And I want you guys to tell me, why is your generation, my generation, our generations, these, past several decades, why are we straying so far from the Raat Maryada? I know it's been brought up that we don't feel like we relate to the cultural and political context in which it was created, but be a little bit more specific for me. Tell me a little bit more about why you personally feel like, I don't really know that this is important in my life, or I don't really feel like I am bound by these principles. Why do we feel that way?
I feel like for me personally, I see a lot of people around me, like at school and other places, that don't really follow it, and I'm like, oh, these are great people. Like, I don't see the harm. They're great people. Also, I feel like not knowing the why. I recently went to a retreat in Austin, and they talked about, do you think the chore sub seva is important? Do you think it's outdated? And everyone had all these different arguments, and in the end, I realized, no one really actually knew why we do chore sub seva. No one really knew why. And I realized, I don't know why. I don't know why we do half the things in the Gurdwara. And this one Benji brought up that rituals that have no meaning are bad, but rituals that don't really affect anything are fine. And it's just, there's people say different things, and I feel like it's just the unclarity of not really knowing what's right, what's not, and then also misinterpretations. Something that Jobin Singh actually said in his speech yesterday in Group 4, he said that practices against the teaching of the Guru Granth Sahib are caused by resistance to change and a lack of understanding and interpretation of the Guru Granth Sahib, which I feel like is true. Me personally, I can read Gurmukhi, but not that well. I've never read the Guru Granth Sahib completely and translated it all. I don't know exactly what it says. I just kind of know what people taught me, what people told me. And I don't know if they read it completely. I'm just going based off what Google says, what people say, and I don't know completely, truly what it is to myself, because I've never been taught to read it. So I think, and it may even be my fault, I didn't really put in that much effort into Khalsa school to learn Gurmukhi. But yeah.
I feel like the way we're educated now, it's very surface level. Even through Khalsa school, you can learn Gurmukhi, you can learn the letters, Punjabi, everything. But the percentage of people or kids who actually go on to read Guru Granth Sahib, understand the meaning of the Bani, is really small. Or even another example that I've seen in today's day through kirtans and stuff is when people do kirtan, they don't really understand the meaning of the Bani or what the Shabad is actually saying, or apply it to their life. Basically, kirtan without understanding what the Bani is saying is just a musical piece. That's all I see in today's world. Kids are doing kirtan, kids are doing stuff at all these gurupurabs and everything, but they don't understand the Bani, so it's just worthless without actually understanding what the Guru wants you to do, wants you to live your life, or how he wants you to live your life.
I do agree that there is a lot of like lack of education over Gurbani, and I think that is the biggest problem as to why people are deviating from the Sikh Raat Maryada, because they're not able to understand what the Guru Granth Sahib is saying, and you can't understand Sikhi based on someone else's interpretation. But as to why that's happening, I do think a large part of it is the oppression of Sikhs in general in India, and this has been happening since the partition of 1947. It's happened with them not with India not recognizing Punjab as the official language, with the redistribution of Punjab, with 1984. There's an oppression of not only Sikhs, but also the education of their religion. There's a lot of assimilation going on. No one really knows whether this is something that Hindus follow or something that Sikhs follow. So I do think that is one of the main reasons why there's a huge disconnect today.
I think community support is one of the biggest things. I know people say education. I do agree education. You want the resources, you want the education to know about Sikh, but it's also the community you surround yourself with. When I used to live in New York, we used to go to Gurdwara, we used to go to kirtans, but I didn't know why. Why did I sit through a 3-hour kirtan? Why did I do this? And then I moved to Texas, and we came to Khalsa school, and I got educated on the simple stuff, and I got educated on why I don't cut my hair or why I do bani. And the people I surround myself around, it helped me realize that, oh, this is why I do this, and this is why I go to kirtan, and now I do part, and I do bani, and I do kirtan, because that's what they taught me.
I have a question for you guys. So Gursneh mentioned something about how part of the issue is that we don't understand the why. When we have those questions arise, who do you guys feel comfortable turning to as a reliable resource to get that answer? Who or what?
Personally, this is something that I've actually discussed with a lot of adults before as well, and it's something I've experienced in my childhood. A lot of questions, if I would ask a question to adult, they would kind of spin it around in a way and end up not even answering at all and falling back to probably Guru Nanak Sahib Ji, and that really did not help me at all. In my own personal experience, I believe really the only place that when you're unsure about something that is Sikh related, I think it's important there's 2 resources: falling back on Sikh history, understanding what they did, why they did it, and what effect it had. And 2, the most important one of all, is just reading the Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Even my interpretation, my understanding of Gurbani is also very limited. But even reading the English translations, applying oh, this word means this words mean this, and there's a lot of really interesting stories in Guru Granth Sahib Ji. If you do Sahaj Path, you can really apply a lot of the Gurbani that's going on to your daily life. So I do think those are the 2 most important resources.
I think for me, what I really relied on is going to Sikh camps. There's a camp in Wisconsin that I've been going to since I was a kid, and for me, asking the older Panjis, Virjis, because everyone's kind of gone through the same things that I have. Everyone grew up as a Sikh in America, kind of went through similar things that I did, so it's really easy for me to ask them because I feel like I trust them, and I feel like they'll give me reliable resources that they've also discovered in life. And also, going back to the previous question, I think another issue is that people don't really talk about modern day role models in Sikhism. People always talk about people in the past, like Banda Singh Bahadur, and that's great. But I feel like no one really talks about modern day role models. Even me, I don't really know any modern day role models in Sikhism that I look up to.
So to answer your question about the why and how we understand the why, I think there's 2 ways you can go about it. One being that you can look and read the Guru Granth Sahib by yourself, because every Sikh has their own relationship with the Guru and Gurbani. So reading the Guru Granth Sahib is a good way to answer any of your questions. And the second is surround yourself by people that you know are more knowledgeable than you and have more knowledge about Gurbani and how to read the Bani and what the Bani means. So basically people that you can trust, and you can trust their interpretation and what their values of Sikhi are.
I usually go to my parents about these questions. Personally, when growing up, I didn't really know about anything, so I went to my parents with any questions I had. When a kid came up to me in school and said, why is your hair so long? I didn't know, so I go to my parents, and they would explain to me. And if they didn't know, Google, tip of our fingers, or Guru Granth Sahib. Still now, when there's something we don't know, we read through the Guru Granth Sahib, and it's laid out for us word by word about what you're doing and why you're doing it.
So you guys bring up a great concept that should really be at the core of what all of us are doing, which is focusing on the teachings in the Guru Granth Sahib, right? Now that's a bit of an abstract concept to some degree, right? There are certainly some tangible things that we can do with just starting to read the Guru Granth Sahib itself, but I wonder, and this is something that I am guilty of myself, so this is certainly not pointing any fingers, but I think it's very easy for us to bring up complaints of why we don't potentially feel connected to Sikhi, right? We can say that, hey, the Bani isn't explained to us well, or Kirtan is not explained to us well. But y'all are all Gen Z, right? You guys take important matters, big global matters, into your own hands, and you are doers, right? You guys take things like climate change, you guys take things like Black Lives Matters into your own hands, and you do things about it. So I'm curious if this lack of feeling connected to Sikhi, if this lack of understanding of Sikhi is a real problem for you personally, what have you done? I want to hear what you have personally done to help bridge that gap, to help solve that problem for yourself, or for your friends, or for your peers. And if you haven't done anything, what is something that you can kind of pledge to do to help us solve this? Because it is very easy for all of us to bring up issues, but it's very difficult to come up with solutions. So from your perspective, what have you done, or what do you hope to do to help solve that?
Personally, when I moved to Texas, I didn't know the simple stuff, the Uda, the Era, the Edi. I couldn't read Punjabi. I could understand it, I couldn't speak it though. So when we moved here and we came to this Gurdwara and we were just hanging around and we went upstairs and we see Khalsa school, and I'm like, what is Khalsa school? And my mom tells me it's how you learn. There are teachers, they teach you. So I was invested in that, and I was like, I want to learn more about my language, because if I go to a grocery store, I hear families and they're talking to each other in their language and their understanding, and I'm like, I want to be able to do that too. So one thing I did, I said, I want to join Khalsa school and I want to learn more.
Going off of kind of what Diva said, I think it's important to find a sangat that kind of supports you, that you feel like you belong in. For me personally, like I said before, I go to camp. I've been going to this camp in Wisconsin forever, and I feel like that's my sangat. Whenever I have any questions about Sikhi, I'll call them up and be like, hey, like, what do you think about blah, 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 X, Y, and Z. I think you have to find a sangat who kind of aligns with you, and even if they don't align with you, maybe challenges what you think. That can be good too. And people who kind of just relate with you. Same with in Dallas, like I went to Dallas camp, I feel like I found a sangat that I could really connect with. In Austin, I feel like I found a sangat that I really connect with. I think it just depends on this. I think something that really brought me into Sikhism more as I grew up was finding the right sangat.
I think the main way that I kind of bridge the gap between Sikhi and myself is through Kirtan. After learning tabla, playing with various Kirtaniyas, and basically just taking part in all these Kirtans, I kind of bridged the gap and understood what the Bani means. I tried to really understand every Shabad after I played with it. And now I'm trying to give back to the other generations by teaching them tabla, trying to get them more involved in Gurbani and stuff like that. So that's basically how I try it. Kirtan is the main way I try to bridge the gap between myself and my Sikhi.
For me, I've been like, I was like told to wear the star from when I was very, very little. And honestly, mean that I didn't understand why I wore it. Well, I understood why I wore it, but that didn't take away from, I honestly had a little bit of animosity towards, like, why do I have to wear this? Like, it literally makes me look like a guy. I would think that all the time. And I think one thing that I did do was, I actually conversed with a lot of adults in my area. I think you did say we are Gen Z. It is in our nature to kind of combat, kind of like question why do we follow the things we do. And I think that's a big theme with religion as well. I do think Gen Z questions religion a lot more than, previous generations have. And I did question my religion. I had a large phase where I questioned why Sikhi, like why am I a Sikh? And I honestly think that questioning did bring me closer to Sikhi, because I found the answers I needed through Sahaj Path, through Kirtan, through Sangat, all of these things.
Now let me ask you, you guys have touched on this a little bit. I'm curious to know whether we think, in this day and age, do we think the physical appearance of a Sikh, the 5 kakars, do we think that is a true requirement for being a Sikh? For our generation, for generations going forward?
I don't think all of them should be needed, but I think it's a main part in your identity. Or then you just look like every other human out there. I think having your hair long or wearing a kara even, I think that shows that you're Sikh. I've had so many people come up to me when I'm wearing a kara and they're like, oh, are you Sikh? Because they have seen my kara. And it just, personally, wearing it gives me a pride in being Sikh. Or just keeping my hair long, it makes me feel good that, oh, I do this because I am a Sikh.
I think the way others view your identity or any pride like that any Sikh should feel from keeping his identity should be kept very different from actually being a good Sikh. I think identity is important, but actually following the Sikh values, following the Bani is much more important than the identity or keeping your gaze. I think those two should be kept completely separate.
I somewhat agree with Gurjot. I think it's absolutely very important to keep that same identity. I think that is one of the core things of Sikhi. And the fact of the matter is that in the past ages in India, when people saw the star, they saw a symbol of safety, they saw a symbol of selfless service, correct? And I don't think this changes today. I think the only thing that changes is like what Gurjot Singh said, is that if we wear the star and we don't practice the values of Sikhi, then it kind of takes away from the identity. And at that point, are you really even wearing the Sikhi Sarup at all if you're not practicing Sikh values?
Like Sahaj said, I think if your identity, if keeping of the star, keeping your gaze can bring you closer to the Guru, then great, that's awesome for you. Because it's based on, Sikhi is based on an individual's relation to the Guru. So if that helps you become closer to the Guru, then great. If not, then your identity holds no value.
I think the representation of the 5Ks is important. I think the gurus gave them to us for a reason, but I think they should be updated. An example of this would be like a kirpan. If someone comes up to me with a gun, my kirpan's probably not going to do anything. I think it's important to have the 5Ks. They're there for a reason, but I think you should have adaptations of them that are relevant in the modern world.
So I'd like to go again. I don't think that's true. I think the 5Ks were directly from the Guru. I think when you choose to be a Sikh, when you choose to be Amritdhari, you are following the Guru's hukam without any questions. It's unquestionable following of the Guru's hukam. So the 5 kakars they were given by our Gurus themselves. You can't question or make any changes to them because that's just going against being a Sikh. You have to follow the Guru's Bani without any questions. Yeah.
Well,
So do we agree? Do we agree that we cannot question Gurbani?
Well,
Right.
I mean, I think Guru Nanak questioned everything. The whole reason that we're Sikhs today is because Guru Nanak questioned his faith, his religion, his parents, the world.
I think the thing with the Kirpan is there's a history behind it. It's actually very important that we call it a Kirpan and not a Talwar because it's Kirpaan. That's very important. A Kirpan is something that does justice. It is not something that hurts. And I think that distinction is extremely important to make.
I would also like to go off the kirpan. It's not only given as a physical weapon, but it represents the strength or the character or the commitment to protect like the weaker or the oppressed. So like when Guru Har Gobind wore it, he was known as a saint soldier because he embodied the ideal of like balancing power and just representing the idea. So not as a physical weapon.
Right.
Well, I mean, today, a kirpan is meant for self-defense and defending others, like you said, Diva. But what if someone came into like a Walmart that I'm in and started shooting up the Walmart?
Right, so anyone can own a gun. You can choose to do whatever. You can choose to own any acts of self-defense, but the point is the 5 kakars shouldn't be changed. The kirpan should be kept as a method of sansipai.
I think it's the representation of the bunch kakars. I don't think it's the physical kakar. I think it's the representation.
I think I do agree. I do agree that a kirpan is more of an ideology. It is more in that, yes, you should have weapons, but yes, you should also think about what you do with those weapons. I think that is what a kirpan represents. However, I do also think that it is very important to have physical representations of those things because it's very, very easy to forget what our values are if we don't see them every single day.
Right.
All right. On that note, we will move on to our third opening statement. That will be given by Gurjot Singh, and the response will be by Sahajkar.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. For Sikhs, there is no other higher authority than Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Sikhs consider Guru Granth Sahib Ji as the living Guru. We feel the presence of all 10 Gurus and their teachings, and it is our ultimate source on how to live and lead and live our life. Gur Satgur Kajo Sikh Akhai, So Palke Ut Har Naam Dhyaye. This was a shabad written by Guru Ramdas Ji in Ang 305 in Rag Gauri, and it gives a definition of a Sikh. In this shabad, Guruji talks about a Sikh's daily routine. A true Sikh wakes up early in the morning, recites Vaheguru's Naam, and throughout the day sings Guru's praises, a kirtan. Basically, a Sikh keeps Ekonkar, the creator, in his thoughts throughout the day. But how can we as Sikhs balance keeping Ekonkar and also balance being disciplined in a society full of Maya and distraction? Just imagine, if there were no traffic lights, no rules on how to drive our busy city streets and highways, what would happen if there was no health, financial, or workplace regulations? There would be accidents and we would face chaos, confusion, and potentially harmful or dangerous situations. Rules and regulations are essential to ensure safety, well-being, and the quality of life. So for Sikhs, the source of these rules is the Sikh Rath Maryada, or the Sikh Code of Conduct. When a Sikh lives life according to the teachings of Gurbani and as directed by the Sikh Rath Maryada, we live a virtuous human life and make a positive impact on the community around us. The Sikh Rath Maryada provides guidelines and principles for Sikh conduct, including practices related to daily life, ceremonies and rituals, social relationships, personal and communal ethics, and a spiritual development. These standards and rules help Sikhi at both an individual and a panthik level. So at an individual level, the Rath Maryada provides clarity on things Sikhs can and cannot do, and at a panthik level, Rath Maryada sets standards and guidelines at a community level, such as the panth status on guruhood, process of taking amrit, gurmata, and so on. These are critical to avoid confusion and keep the community and unity and consistency for Sikhs around the globe. And for the second question on why Sikhs have strayed away from the Sikh way of life or following the Rath Maryada, I think it is because of the influence of media and popular culture, social and cultural pressures, and like Sahaj said, just the time frame in which the Rath Maryada was constructed. And for the third question, I do believe that Sant Sapai and the Kirpan, the sword, is important, and we should essentially just follow what the Rath Maryada says about Sant Sapai. But however, I do believe that no matter what it says in the Rath Maryada, no matter what aspects or what rules are written in there, there's also room for growth with the guidance of a Gurbani. We need to have gurmatas and basically stuff that we can change to reflect modern issues, modern times. So there is room for growth in the Rath Maryada. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Sahajkar.
Waheguru Ji Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So Gurjot Singh highly emphasized living off of Gurbani and understanding the rules of Gurbani. And I do agree with his point that the Rath Maryada does create a framework in which we can apply that Gurbani. I also think that the Rath Maryada is created based off of Gurbani. So I do think that it is an interchangeable, well, not necessarily interchangeable, but I do think that these two things create each other. Furthermore, he also mentioned pop culture and media making Sikhs deviate from the Rath Maryada. I believe that the Rath Maryada is actually a resource, or at least it should be a resource, to help Sikhs ignore the influences of pop culture and media and understand that these are things that I must do, these are rules that I must do regardless of what everyone else is doing around me, because it's not to say as if in the past there weren't influences at the time. The Mughal Raj was like extremely influential. So I do think that with an updated Rath Maryada, with revisions and updates, I do think that the Rath Maryada can become a resource instead of something that restricts and something that pop culture can attack and take away from.
I want to go off of something that Sahaj Kaur said. She said something about the Rahat Maryada and Gurbani being intertwined already. I don't agree with that. I think that Gurbani doesn't say anything about what's on the outside. It doesn't say anything about external features, external factors, but the Rahat Maryada is all about external everything, and Gurbani is all about internal. I feel like for revising it, we need to kind of strike a balance between the internal and external in the Rahat Maryada.
I disagree that the Rahat Maryada is all about external factors. It actually a large portion of it is consistent on how to apply Gurbani in our daily lives. And that's not based on Panchakakar or anything. That's things like Nitnem, that's things like the Panchbaniyam, stuff like that.
I think the Sacred Maryada more provides guidance. I think this is like a spiritual discipline thing because it says you should do Nam, Simran, or Nitnem and Seva because it'll help you like connect with Vaheguru. So I don't think it's more of a rule, more of a guidance on what it is. And it is connected with Gurbani because it's saying it like unites everyone together.
So in kind of response to what I'm hearing each of you say in your own way, one of the things right at the very beginning of the Rahat Maryada you will have all noticed is that it gives you the definition of a Sikh, right? It has a separate section where it defines who a Sikh is. And it specifically says a Sikh is a man or woman who has faith in one God, okay, who has faith in the 10 Gurus, the Shri Guru Granth Sahib, the Bani of the Gurus, has faith in the Amrit of the 10th Guru, and does not believe in any other religion. That, to me, seems like it's summarizing exactly who a Sikh is. So then where does that leave the rest of the Rahat Maryada? Is that simply suggestions, recommendations, icing on the cake, or is it a requirement to be a Sikh?
Well, just like the entire Guru Granth Sahib Ji is a suggestion, the Rahat Maryada cannot be like a requirement. Of course, it has to be a suggestion. But I do think that the rest, as I said before, the rest of the Rahat Maryada helps you bridge that disconnect between reading something in Gurbani, understanding it, and then actually applying it in your real life. I think the Rahat Maryada helps you understand how to do that.
I think the Rahat Maryada does provide discipline for Sikhs and provides like a framework for Sikhs, but I also do think that it should be revised because a lot of it isn't in a language that's relevant to today in the modern world.
I think the Sacred Maryada should also be more of a suggestion. There are certain things that I think we should follow, like honesty, hard work, service, the simple stuff, but I think it should also be updated to current status, and we don't have to follow everything, because this is from a long time ago. This is all the way from the 1900s, and I think it should be updated to our current century.
I do agree. The Rahat Maryada does provide like discipline rules, but whenever you have any questions about what to do or what you're supposed to do, you shouldn't be looking to the Rahat Maryada. You should be looking to Guru Granth Sahib Ji, the only living Guru we have. And so, of course, it's important, but the most important thing in any Sikh's life is the Guru Granth Sahib Ji.
I also think that some form of uniformity within any community is important. For example, in a hospital, like different departments wear different colored scrubs, so you kind of know who's who. I think like a level of, that's kind of like a weird example, but that kind of uniformity is important for different communities to have.
I've heard a lot of comments about needing to update the Rahat Maryada. What are a couple of things that come to mind? What would you update?
So for me, the main thing that I found when I was doing my research is the gender-specific words that are used in Rahat Maryada, and basically just the gender inequality, stuff like that. So I have a specific line of Bani from Guru Granth Sahib. Dhan per e na aankhein bahan ikatthe hoye, ek jyot doye murti, dhan per kya soye. So this literally translates to, they are not said to be husband and wife who sit together, they alone are called husband and wife who have one light in two bodies. So according to Gurbani, if a husband and wife have the same jyot or same light, then how can we qualify one as superior or one as inferior? I think the Rahat Maryada should be updated and take into account this Bani, such as like this one I just said, just to reflect the gender-specific words that are in Rahat Maryada currently.
Okay, beyond that, anyone have any thoughts?
I think, of course, I think they should update the gender-specific words. Especially, I know there's a portion about men having to wear the stud and it not being a requirement for women. That's one thing I do agree, think should be updated. However, beyond that, I actually think that things should be added to the Rahat Maryada. I think there are a lot of experiences that Sikhs today go through that Sikhs in the past did not. And I think that there's really no resource for Sikhs to look onto to see like what should I do in this situation. And if they don't understand Gurbani, I do agree that Gurbani, the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, should be the main resource. But if that's not really an option at the moment, the Rait Maryada should be something that they can fall back onto, and so I do think we should add things to it.
I think along with the gender-specific language, which is like kind of not including homosexual people and gender fluid people or other people, the Rehat Maryada is pretty exclusive. It's not very inclusive, and Sikhism is all about inclusivity. An example of this is Professor Darshan, who is an iconic kirtaniya from India. He traveled around the world, did kirtan. He was barred from doing kirtan in certain Canadian gurdwaras because he had a knee replacement surgery and he couldn't sit on the ground and do kirtan. And they were like, no, you can't do kirtan here. It's against the Rehat Maryada. So I feel like it needs to be a little bit more inclusive because Sikhism is all about inclusivity. It's all about including everyone. And yeah.
I know one thing we did mention earlier, I think Gersani mentioned it, is that it says you can't have piercings. I got my ears pierced when I was a kid. And I think, obviously maybe 100 years ago, they were like, oh, maybe piercings shouldn't be a thing. But obviously people grow, things change, and it should just be updated to current status.
Yeah, I think one of the main things I also saw that I think needs to be updated is how women are allowed to do kirtan in in Harmandir Sahib. So in 2019, there was a Punjab governor who said women should be allowed to do kirtan in Harmandir Sahib, and an Akali leader cited the Rait Maryada as a defense. I think we should update the language in order to allow women to be able to do kirtan in Harmandir Sahib. It shouldn't be limited to just men. It should be open to anyone who wants to recite Guru's Bani, who wants to become a better Sikh, who wants to just become closer to their Guru.
I agree. We, as Sikhs, we say equality for all. Gurbani emphasizes the importance of treating people equal, regardless of their religion, caste, social status, or gender. And it's also reflected in Guru Granth Sahib. They say all humans are equal and there's no superiority of one over other. So women should be also treated the same.
Going off of kind of my opening statement is that the people that make these decisions are jathedars who don't really have proper qualifications to be in this. How are they elected? It's just by their connections. It's just by who they know and stuff like that. So I think that one other thing that we can change is how people are elected and how we choose them.
One of the things, just going off of something that was mentioned, that women maybe aren't allowed to do kirtan in certain congregations. There also is mentioned in the Rehat Maryada that non-Sikhs cannot do kirtan in our congregation as well. How do we feel about that? Is that okay?
I think it should be okay, but as long as they understand the Bani and what Bani they're actually singing. I think there was a video a long time ago about Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, a Qawwali, some guy who sang Guru's praises in a Gurdwara, and he was all this clapping stuff. I don't think that should be there. I think any modern stuff like clapping should be excluded. But if someone who's not Sikh understands the Bani, understands the Kirtan, he should be allowed to do Kirtan.
How do you know whether they do or don't understand? And in fact, how do you even know that a Sikh who is doing Kirtan in Gurdwara does or does not understand the Gurbani? Because we actually mentioned so many of these kids are just doing kind of rote repetition of what they're learning without understanding. So how do we apply that practically?
I think there's a point. I think it's important to make there's a difference between a performance and actually doing kirtan for yourself and for the Guru and for the Sangat. I think, of course, non-Sikhs should be allowed to learn kirtan. I think they should be helped in learning kirtan because a lot of the messages in Gurbani are very universal. But I think before we get into the musical aspect of it, it's very important, not only for non-Sikhs, for Sikhs as well, to actually understand why they're doing the Shabad they're doing. If they find a specific Shabad, if they think it pertains to a specific situation, then why not? If they want to give that message to the Sangat, that's perfect. But if they're sitting on a stage and they're just showing off their musical ability and adding some words that they don't really know what means, I think at that point it becomes a performance. I don't think that's okay for non-Sikhs or Sikhs.
So do you think that in presence of Guru Granth Sahib in Gurdwara, non-Sikh people should be allowed to do Kirtan? Is that what you're saying?
I think that when it's in a Sangat, yes, I do think it is. But when it's somewhere like Harmandir Sahib, even the Ragis of Harmandir Sahib are very carefully selected.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I do think that it really depends on the situation.
So why is Harmandir Sahib any different than our Gurdwara here? We have Guru Granth Sahib, we have Sangat. Should that not be pretty equal?
I think there's just a larger audience. There's broadcasts, there's non-Sikhs, there's people from all over the world coming to Harmandir Sahib. That is the prime place for Sikhs to, to do pilgrimage towards. So I think it's a little bit dangerous if we let someone who doesn't understand Gurbani do kirtan there.
So let me ask you this then. The Guru Granth Sahib itself, and I think you guys will all know kind of where I'm headed with this, has many contributions from, if we want to call them, quote unquote, non-Sikhs.
Right.
People from other faiths, Hindus, Muslims, and otherwise. If our gurus deemed them in line enough with Sikh principles to contribute to our ultimate holy scripture, to the Guru Granth Sahib, then why can't people of their lineage or people of their faith be able to do kirtan at Harmandir Sahib? How is that any different?
I think as long as you respect the Guru Granth Sahib, respect the people around you, and you're respecting the message of the Gurbani, I think you're good. And also, I don't think it's right to compare one Gurdwara to another. As long as there's a Guru Granth Sahib and a Sangat, I think all Gurdwaras are kind of the same. There's no difference if the Guru Granth Sahib's here versus at a Gurdwara in India. I think it's the same thing.
Right.
It's the same message.
I
the same
agree,
thing.
but I also think we do kirtan more for the Sangat. We don't do kirtan for the Guru Granth Sahib Ji. And also in your question yourself, you stated that the Gurus deemed them to be allowed to be in the Guru Granth Sahib Ji. It's not the Sikh Sangat that allowed them to be in Guru Granth Sahib Ji. We are not at a level where we can determine whether or not someone's understanding of Gurbani is, on the same level as, say, Guru Arjan Sahib Ji. So I don't think that's a very fair thing to do.
Okay, but I feel like any one random person could be like, oh, I'm a Sikh for today, so I'm going to go do kirtan up here. And then the next day they'll be like, oh, I'm not a Sikh anymore. So I feel like you can't be like, oh,
Right, that's why I said I think that's a rule that should be stated for non-Sikhs and Sikhs.
So then who would do kirtan?
I mean, at Harmandir Sahib?
Yeah.
The Ragis are very specifically selected at Harmandir Sahib, and it's not like any Sikh can go up and do kirtan there.
So you think that anyone can do kirtan at a Gurdwara here, but not at Harmandir Sahib?
Not necessarily. Like I said, I think Harmandir Sahib has a much larger audience. I don't think, of course it's good to do kirtan, that's how you learn when you're in the Sangat, but Harmandir Sahib is essentially a stage where they do kirtan. It is not in Sangat, so I think that's a distinction.
I think you have to think rationally when you talk about things like this. Like when you talk about people doing kirtan at Harmandir Sahib, obviously it's the highest place for us as Sikhs. It's the most sacred place. They're gonna want Amritdharis, people who follow all the Sikh values, but it's logistically impossible to at these gurdwaras for you to handpick people to do kirtan who
Right.
are aligned with Sikh. It's just logistically impossible.
I would like to go off of something said when she said we're doing kirtan for the Sangat versus ourselves or Guru Granth Sahib. I agree in the fact that Harmandir Sahib is one of we call it the Golden Temple. That's where people go. It's more of a show than something personal. But I think in a regular sense, what you're doing, it shouldn't be for the people around you. It should be for yourself or for Guru Granth Sahib. It's more of a self-reflection or a discipline rather than, oh, I'm doing this for the audience to make them happy. It's more for yourself.
Also, how do you know that the biceps at Harmandir Sahib are doing it for the Sangat and not themselves? If they're handpicked and supposed to be the best Sikhs out there, then how do you know that they're doing it for the Sangat and not themselves?
I wouldn't say they're the best Sikhs
Yeah,
out
they're not picked as the best Sikhs. They're only picked according to whether they're Amritdhari and
right, and their
that.
experience with kirtan, and they are doing it for the Sangat because it is broadcasted to everyone around them. And of course, they're doing it for the Sangat, they're doing it for themselves. But I think the point we were arguing at that moment was whether or not anywhere with Guru Granth Sahib Ji was okay, because you can do kirtan without Guru Granth Sahib Ji as well. That's why I was saying it's for the Sangat, it's for yourself. I wasn't taking away from that.
All right, I'm going to move forward with our final opening statement. And so that opening statement will come from Divakar, and I'm sure you guys have already deduced that the response will be by Gursnekar.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. As mentioned, every religion has prescribed the code of conduct for its followers, and for Sikhs, it's the Rahat Maryada. The Sikh way of life is based on the teachings of Sikh gurus as recorded in the Guru Granth Sahib and is guided by the Sikh Maryada. According to the Red Maryada, a Sikh should live a life of devotion to God, honest, equality, and service to others. And the Gurus emphasize this importance of leading a righteous life or engaging in selfless service and promoting justice and equality. And as that, we are expected to maintain a high moral conduct and follow the 5 main vows, the 5 Ks, which we have went over. We're expected to follow that, as well as the 3 principles like Nam Jopo, Kirat Karo, and Vanchako. We are expected to avoid ego, anger, greed, and lust, and engage in selfless service to others. The Sikh way of life is also mentioned to go to Gurdwara and participate in community service and go to ceremonies. And we're encouraged to study and reflect on the teachings of Gurbani and apply these teachings to our daily lives. The Sikh Red Maryada also provides guidelines for our Sikh community, like the management of Gurdwaras, like practicing thought or living an ethical and honest life. These are just a few examples, I would say. And as for straying away from Gurbani, I think that's just something, it depends on the person. It's up to each individual on how to live your life and according to your values and your beliefs. But obviously there are ways that you can fall back on the path of Sikhism. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
I'd like to agree with Diva. I think that the Rahit Maryada does kind of hold Sikh to a high moral standard, which is good. It helps them follow principles that are stated in the Guru Granth Sahib, and also different things like practicing thought, things like that. And another thing is that I don't think it really kind of helps individuality. I feel like it kind of suppresses it a little bit. Like I said before, it kind of focuses a lot about external factors, which I do believe suppresses individuality, which may be a good or bad thing. Another thing is I do think it should be revised, as we all also stated before, to have more gender inclusive language, be more diverse in the people who are making the decisions, have more competency checks for the people who are making the decisions, and yeah. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Anyone else have any thoughts? All right, so talk to me a little bit about what was brought up about suppressing potentially individuality. As Sikhs, if we are given, an external identity as well as some internal principles and values that we should be following, do we think that by setting that as a requirement that we are preventing individuals from expressing themselves in their own unique ways? Or is this an effort to kind of keep everyone uniform? Is there any benefit to this, or do we feel like this is actually potentially hindering us going forward?
I do agree that it suppresses individuality. However, I also agree with Krishna's previous statement that uniformity is necessary in a religion or in any sort of establishment. That's why I think that it's really important that, along with following the Rahit Maryada, you also keep up with your own interpretation of Guru Granth Sahib Ji, because Sikhi starts at an individual level. You must understand your individual position on Sikhi and how you interact with it before you're able to contribute to the Panth. So
I think that I also agree with Sej. I think it's all about how you interpret the Guru Granth Sahib. It's all about you, how you personally see the Guru Granth Sahib. If you have a different interpretation, that's fine. Sikh philosophy does encourage questioning. We wouldn't be Sikhs today if Guru Nanak didn't question his whole life. And the Rahit Maryada, while it may suppress that, uniformity is good, but the Rahit Maryada may suppress that individuality that comes from interpreting the Guru Granth Sahib yourself.
All right, I think actually we will keep this one a little short because we're now about an hour into our conversation and we haven't quite gotten to the main question. So that is, I think, reflective very well for all of you because you guys are very engaged and I am really appreciating the thoughts that you are presenting. I will give a quick moment to you. Do any of you need to run to the restroom or take a quick break? Yes? Okay, so I'm going to limit this to a 5-minute break because I do want to keep things moving. So it is 5:44, let's say 5:45 right now. If you can all be back by 5:50 so we can keep going and then start wrapping things up. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. If you can hear me in the Langar Hall or anywhere else outside of the Diwan Hall, please make your way back to the Diwan Hall so we can keep things moving. We are going to be starting in the next 60 seconds or so.
For real? I didn't. It was. I didn't even notice.
It was. I was like, okay.
You're a little cheater.
Oh, we're on. I should have checked it when I was outside.
They do not remember Kirtan and Dhamma.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
No, they don't.
I will send you a video of a woman.
They don't like Kirtan do.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. We are going to go ahead and get started. So this is kind of the second phase of this debate, and that will involve, like I had mentioned before, me asking questions to individual participants and then allowing some space for open discussion, which you guys have been thriving at. So I'm going to do a little bit more to hopefully help direct and rein it in, because otherwise you don't even need me here. You guys are doing a great job without it. But let's just try to keep things moving a bit. And I also, for the Sangat that is here listening and enjoying so much of what you guys are discussing, I also just want to make quick mention once again that there will be an opportunity at the end of the scored portion of this debate for our Sangat members to ask any questions if they have them. So as they are listening to you guys, I urge you in the Sangat to keep track of anything that you want to ask or anything you want to get the opinion of our participants on, because they obviously have some lovely thoughts and some great ideas, and we'd love to hear what they have to say in response to what I'm sure are very insightful questions from the Sangat as well. So you guys will also get your opportunity there. All right, so our first question will be directed to Gurjot Singh. And my question for you, Gurjot, you have mentioned a couple of times that if we are comparing between the Guru Granth Sahib and the Rahat Maryada, our default should be to understand that the Guru Granth Sahib trumps the Rahat Maryada. And that we should look to that primarily and as the ultimate in terms of answers to questions that we have or any other debates or controversies that come up. But Sahaj mentioned and others have mentioned that the Rahat Maryada itself is a product of a Sarbat Khalsa and a bringing together of members of the Sikh Panth to create this kind of code of conduct. In Sikhi, we have the idea that Guru Granth and Guru Panth go hand in hand. And not only do they go hand in hand, but they are on equal ground. So then, how do you reconcile that concept with your comments that you have made about one being on a higher level or one being more important than the other? How would you reconcile those two?
So are you just asking like why I think that Guru Granth is higher than the Panth
Yeah,
itself?
if the Rahat Maryada is a product of the Guru Panth and then the Guru Granth Sahib, of course, as the other end of that, as the Guru Granth. Why do we say one is higher or more deserving or more important than the other? Should they not be on equal footing?
So I'm not saying Guru Panth is inferior or less on a less stature than the Guru Granth Sahib. I'm just saying that when Guru Panth comes together to make decisions, they need to take all their decisions, take all the decisions they come to. They need to be in accordance with Guru Granth Sahib. So it's not as if Guru Granth Sahib is superior. It's more of the interconnectedness between Guru Granth Sahib and the Guru Panth. Guru Panth and Guru Granth should be on equal footing. I do agree with that. I'm just saying that when in terms of looking at what you need to, how you should live your life, you should look at Guru Granth Sahib before looking at Rahat Maryada, because Guru Granth Sahib is the direct words of our gurus. Rahat Maryada is essentially a reflection of the values of our gurus, but it's not direct wording from our gurus.
Okay, so then let me ask you this. Then really, apart from the Guru Granth Sahib, nothing going forward for millennia will ever be the direct words of our gurus, correct?
Right.
But I think part of that, and I'm going to perseverate here a little bit more on what my question was, and that's just to kind of pick your brain here. That's not to say that you haven't given an appropriate response, but I just want to urge you to think about this a little bit more, is that the gurus directly themselves, especially in establishing the Khalsa Panth, as Guru Gobind Singh did, specifically gave power to the Khalsa, gave power to the Guru Panth, and said, forevermore, effectively, this is your Guru. The Khalsa, the Sangat, the Guru Panth is the Guru. So then, why is a product of that not equivalent to the direct words of the Guru, if in fact it is a decision on behalf of the Guru Panth?
I think the product of the Guru Panth doesn't accurately reflect Guru Granth Sahib in itself. I told you there's a lot of holes in the Rahat Maryada that I believe don't accurately reflect the Guru Granth Sahib, such as the gender-specific terms. So I believe that the product you're referring to, Rahat Maryada, isn't actually a fully accurate representation of the Guru Granth Sahib. That's why I think it should be changed. It should be amended or reformed in order to accurately kind of entail the words of our Guru and the Guru Granth Sahib.
What do the rest of you think? Anyone else have any thoughts here?
I think the Rahat Maryada is more of a guidance than a set of rules. Like obviously we do need rules. I know Gurjot mentioned earlier, like traffic lights. I mean, it tells you when to go, when you don't, and if you don't have it, then it's chaos. That's what I think Rahat Maryada is. But it's also more of a guidance than an actual rule book.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. So Sahajgar and then Gursnekar.
Okay, so obviously Guru Panth and Guru Granth are on the same equal footing. However, even when Guru Panth gets together, they base their decisions off of Guru Granth Sahib Ji. There's a hukamnama taken, and I don't think that it is accurate to make the Rahat Maryada equivalent to Guru Panth, actually, because I think that the Rahat Maryada was not meant to be a substitution to the Guru Granth Sahib Ji. I think it's a little bit unfair to compare those two things. Like Diva Kaur said, I think it is a guideline, and that's what it was meant to be. So in that like setting, I do agree with Gurjot saying that the Guru Granth Sahib Ji is higher than the Rahat Maryada.
So if the Rahat Maryada was only intended as guidelines, as kind of an outline for Sikhs, why is there, enumeration of punishment for not following it? For what defines it then kaya and what defines then ka? Why do we need to be punished for not following it if it's simply suggestions or recommendations or guidelines?
Well, going back to what the question before, I was going to say that the Rahat Maryada, there's Guru Panth and Guru Granth. The Guru Panth, I don't think is properly represented in the Rahat Maryada. Going back to like the language in it, it was written a long time ago. Like I said, the language in it, and then also the representatives that wrote it. I don't think all the Sangat, all the Sikhs are properly represented in the Rahat Maryada.
So going back to your question about the punishment thing, I don't think punishment accurately reflects what we should do if someone doesn't follow Rahat Maryada. I just think if you don't follow the teachings, if you don't follow the values reflected in Guru Granth Sahib and Rahat Maryada, some of them, then you are not a good Sikh in Guru's eyes, and that's enough repercussion for me, I think, honestly.
I think that on Gursnekar's point about the Jathedars, it's not true that they were just appointed just based on who they know. As in the past and even now, they were appointed by Gurmata, and election is not something that is in the Sikh way of life. That's not how Sikhs in history have politically organized themselves. They have done things through Gurmata, through a consensus, and that's how the Jathedars have been appointed. And it's not, in every establishment, there must be some sort of representation. And especially like in the 1800s and 1900s, all of the missals, there were like 72. You can't have all of these Sikhs try and make a decision. Representatives must be appointed.
I'm not saying that there shouldn't be representatives. I'm saying that the representatives should be more inclusive to the people, to Sikhs. Sikhs don't just live in India. There's Sikhs right now, like us, who live in Texas. Why don't we have a representative?
Right, but in the 2015 Gurmata, there were representatives from all around the world. So I don't think it's right that Jathedars or representatives are just appointed like just randomly. They do take representatives from all around the world when these Gurmatas happen.
So how do they appoint the representatives then? Like what's the
Through a
system?
Gurmata, through a consensus.
So like how's it, like where was the consensus here?
There was one in Canada, there was one in the United States, there was one in the UK. They chose people like collectively to
But like
send.
who's collected? Like how did they choose it? Did they vote? Like what happened?
I don't have that much knowledge on it, but I do know that the ideals of the Sikh Sangat was taken into consideration.
I don't know. I don't think they got the ideals from all Sikhs.
Yeah,
From the
but
whole
it's
Sikh
impossible. You can't get the
Yeah.
ideals and the opinions
you
of
don't
every
do
single
that
Sikh.
in-
So that's why we
yeah.
have these Gurmatas to kind of show, get the best Sikh minds, or the people who have the most knowledge on Sikhi, to try to come together and make a resolution. So it's completely illogical to like think that you can't get the opinion of every Sikh, every single person from
Okay, but
everywhere.
how do you know who has the most knowledge on Sikhi?
Yeah, and how do you know who should be representative from the one state of the United States of America?
Well,
There's
then
so many
how
people,
are we
there's so many
ever going to
Sikhs
get
here.
anything done then?
That's why there is a consensus.
There's
That's
a
why people
consensus,
decide
yeah.
on
But
that.
you said that voting shouldn't be a thing, so how is a
I
consensus
didn't say
made?
it shouldn't be a thing. I said that's not historically how Sikhs have politically organized
So
themselves.
how did the...
So this is case in point of why you guys really don't need me, because you're great at asking questions of each other regardless. But I'm going to take this opportunity to go to the next question and really piggyback off of this, because I think you guys are bringing up great points, and I want to kind of take a little bit of time to reflect on those. So the next question is for Gursne Kaur. And again, like I said, I'm really going off of what you guys are giving me here. So clearly we feel also that the Rahat Maryada may not be reflective entirely in its every detail of what Sikhism is today. And that is mainly, we are directing that towards the diaspora. As Sikhs living outside of Punjab, living outside of the homeland of Sikhi, I think that that is what is most pertinent to us. And so I want to know, and I really want, Gursne, you to, and feel free to take a little bit before you answer if you need to, but I want you to ideate a little bit for me on exactly some of the questions that you're bringing up. If we have the opportunity to edit or revise the Rahat Maryada, because you're right, if you look at the Rahat Maryada right now, those Sikh academics, those Jathedars, those institutions that contributed to the initial draft in the 1930s, and then the finalized and accepted draft by the SGPC by 1950, they are all based in Punjab. There is not an inclusion of the diaspora. There is not an inclusion of international Sikhs. So I'm curious of a few things, and feel free to address these as you're able to. But if we are really interested in representing Sikhs of all ages, of all nationalities, of all languages, of all races, and we want to represent that entire Sikh community, how do we do that? I'm talking logistically. So specifically the questions that you guys were bringing up. Is this a vote? Is this an election process? Is this a process whereby we are testing Sikh knowledge? Tell me procedurally, what do we do? Not in the abstract. I don't want to know grand concepts that we can't actually put into play, but how would you go about getting representatives of these various Sikh populations, and what would those requirements look like? would decisions that are made about the representatives and then about edits to the Rehat Maryada, would they require unanimous consent? Would they require kind of majority rule? And how would we even get there? So clearly this is a multi-part question. I want you to start to address this, and obviously we will open it up to conversation amongst everyone as well.
Okay. One thing that I think could really help is like a federal type system. So, for example, in the United States of America, we all know we elect representatives. And these representatives are based on where you live, how many people live where you live, and it's based on areas. So maybe splitting up different areas. For example, there's a lot of Sikhs in Canada. Maybe splitting up different sections of Canada, splitting up different sections of the United States. If there's a lot of Sikhs in South America, South American Sikhs, based on how many people live in whatever section, and appointing or voting in a representative. I think voting is a very good system to get your voice heard. What majority of the people want is the representative that's voted in. And then these representatives who have ran for election go to the Sarbat Khalsa and have their voices heard in Punjab.
So I'd like to combat that. I think we are doing a decent job of getting people from international communities to kind of come to these events like Sarbat Khalsa. I do know personally Harinder Singh from the US was at Sarbat Khalsa. So I think we are doing a decent job of getting people from international places to go to Punjab and take part in these events. So I don't think it's fair to say that only people from Punjab have their voices in Gurmatas and Sarbat Khalsa and stuff. I think we are doing a good job of getting people from other
How are
areas.
those people selected, though? And how do we know that they are representing the interests of the communities that they are representing?
So I don't have the knowledge on how they're...
Yeah, so then ideate about that, because we clearly are not involved in that process, right? And so I feel like as a Sikh in the US, I should have some say. So how do I get that say?
Of course, voting is a process that works in a lot of countries. It works here. And I don't think it's a bad process. I do think that everyone is able to get their say out. However, I know that it is not in line with the Gurmata, the Guru Panth that Guru Gobind Singh Ji established. It is based on consensus. That is what Gurmata is. And that is something that Guru Gobind Singh Ji himself has established. So I do agree that we should split it up into different regions, maybe by Gurdwara, maybe something like that. But I think there should be largely a consensus on it rather than voting.
So how do you think we come to a consensus, and like consensus of like states, consensus like from...
I think, well, logistically, I feel like it would be best to start with Gurdwaras. I feel like it would be best to maybe here, Garland and Akal Jot, you decide representatives, and then they go and decide on what they need, what their demands are, and then they report it back, and then they elect representatives to go on from there.
I know you said elect representatives, but you said you also didn't want to vote.
Sorry, that was wrong choice of wording.
I agree with what Gursune was going off of voting. I think voting would be a completely good thing about this, because not only are you getting one representative's idea, you're getting the majority of the population. You're seeing what they want rather than, one person, what they want. You're getting everyone's opinion voiced in.
Also, I feel like by Gurdwara, I feel like that's too small scale. There's so many Sikhs in America, just using America, there's so many Sikhs in America. I think it should be by region, maybe by state. Even by state is very small. I think maybe by region would be a better thing to do for...
I think everyone should, honestly, the most logistical way I can think of going about this is everyone meet at one specific location. Whoever wants to vote, whoever wants to put their voice to use can meet at one specific location and elect whoever they want.
I mean, what if you're socioeconomically poor? What if you're poor and you can't afford transportation to go to Washington to vote?
Then we'll have to enact some policies or some resources. I know we have we could enact some policies or funding or resources for people like that. Then we can that's a bridge later.
How would you get that infrastructure to bring all these people to one place to vote on a representative?
Just how we combat any other issue, through funding, through resources, donations, stuff like that. It's logistically possible. I just think that's the best situation that we could do.
So one other thing I'm just going to say now, because we're having more lively conversation, I will ask that you guys raise your hand when you have something to say, only because I want to give everybody an opportunity to be able to speak up. And again, this is a good thing that I'm having to enact this, because again, it means that you're engaged, you're involved, and so I appreciate that, but just so that I can kind of help to keep our conversation organized. Now, based off of this, a little bit, something that you mentioned, Sahej, was that you keep referring to consensus. What do you mean by consensus? Again, I'm really trying to get down to the nitty-gritty details here. So when you say consensus, do you mean that decisions have to be unanimous, or that they can be just majority decisions?
Actually, I don't think they have to be unanimous, and it's something I said in my opening as well. That's actually an ideal that is engraved in Gurmata, is that even if we disagree, the consensus that the Khalsa Panth comes to, that's what we follow. And I don't think that it is correct to compare this to some kind of federal voting system, because this is not like a government, correct? This is something for the religion. And I don't think it's correct to compare it like that, because the political things that we follow, because it's for our religion, it has to be based off of what our religion has established for us, and that is a Gurmata.
Okay, then let me ask you this. So, one, I will emphasize the fact that Sikhi is, I think, fairly unique in emphasizing the importance of the political aspect going hand in hand with the religious aspect, correct? But again, Gurmata, I understand, Sarbat Khalsa, I understand. I want you to tell me if we have representatives, or whether they are elected, whether they are appointed, if they are coming to any sort of decision when it comes to our Rahat Maryada, do you think that needs to be a unanimous decision, that everybody must agree, or can that be a majority decision?
I do not think it needs to be unanimous, especially because in the past it hasn't been unanimous, and that's, like I said, one of the biggest ideals we follow is that what is decided by Khalsa Guru Panth is what we follow, just like we would have followed what is decided by a real guru himself.
I think it does need to be unanimous, because just say one person doesn't agree, but that one person is still Khalsa. So if all of Khalsa doesn't agree on any changes, then you're not following what the guru told you to do.
I don't think
Make sure you raise your hand, guys.
Sorry.
All right, Diva.
I disagree with that. I think, obviously, if we have a Panth, I don't think it should be
Unanimous.
Because obviously someone will disagree on something. Not everyone has to agree on one point, but if majority people are saying something, then that has to make an impact. If one person is like, this shouldn't happen, but like everyone else is saying, yeah, it should, that's just their opinion rather than everyone saying it could be right.
Grisne?
I think that it does not have to be unanimous. I think a majority vote is fine. If everyone votes, for example, if everyone votes, women should do kirtan in Darbar Sahib, and one random person says, no, like, I don't think so. I don't think they should randomly just be like, oh, yeah.
That's why we have those representatives that we've elected, because they reflect our values.
Okay,
So
but
Make sure we're raising our hands, guys,
if they don't
specifically
agree?
for these situations.
Sorry,
Okay, Gurjot, did you have something to finish?
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, that's why we elected those representatives who reflect our values of, like, just say someone who wants a woman to do kirtan. That's why I think we have those elected representatives in place. That's why I think it should be unanimous. One person is still considered Khalsa for me.
But even in the U.S., like, House of Representatives, like, there's going to be some people that don't agree, even if all these representatives agree.
Right, but that they have nothing to do
Raise
with
your
religion.
hand.
But they have nothing to do with religion. That's political framework. They're running the government of the
Okay,
United
but that's
States.
the representative framework.
Okay.
If some representatives
All right.
don't agree, then...
I'm going to have Diva Gar and then Sahaj Gar.
Okay, but they still write the rules, okay? You're saying that government isn't related to this, but they set the rules, just like everything, the Khalsa Panth would set the rules for the Rahat Maryada, so are they. So they are hand in hand in a way.
And Sahaj Gar?
Yeah, I think that like Sarbat Khalsa is inherently political, and I don't think it is like possible logistically to have everyone be unanimous, regardless of whether they were elected or just some random person. And also, like I said, it is literally in the ideals of Gurmata that it's not supposed to be unanimous.
All right, and then one more question kind of about this. I want to ask you guys, again, this is open to the group. When we're talking about having representatives to help us make these decisions across various Sikh communities, are there mandatory things that the requirements that they must meet in order to be able to represent our community? Must they be Amritari? Must they be a certain age? Must they have read the Guru Granth Sahib X number of times? Must they be able to play the Vaja or the Tabla? What are the requirements?
I don't think there should be...
Sahaj Gar, raise your hand. Just raise your hand, guys. Thank you. Sahaj Gar and then Gursne.
Based on the Amritari thing, I personally don't think they should have to be Amritari because there are plenty of groups of people who consider themselves Sikhs that are not Amritari, that may not even follow the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, but they consider themselves to be Sikh, right? So I don't think being Amritari, I think having that, like, those different perspectives is really important in a Sarbat Khalsa. I don't think that should be a requirement.
Okay, Gursnekar?
The point of a representative is to represent the people. So if the people elect someone, that represents them. So it doesn't matter who they are, what they are. The people wanted them to represent them. So if they elect someone to represent them, it doesn't matter who they are. That's who they elected. That's who they want to go.
Okay, Divakar?
I would like to go off what you said about age. I think there should be an age restriction. Obviously, we're not going to let a 17-year-old sit on the board and be like, oh, hey, this is that. I think there should be a certain age. And also, back to what Sahej was saying about Amritari, I think they should just have a knowledge more than oh, I read through the whole Guru Granth Sahib. No, you should have a knowledge of what it is.
Okay, and I think this may touch on perhaps what prompted a lot of people to raise their hands, but why not have a 17-year-old? Why not have someone representing the youth? Gursnekar, and then Sahejkar and Gurjot.
As I said before, a representative represents the people. So if the people elect or want a 17-year-old to represent them, why not? That's who reflects their values, and that's who they want to represent them.
Yeah, and also there have been many points in history where someone younger than 17 has taken control of the Qaum. That could be Guru Har Krishan Sahib Ji, Guru Gobind Singh Sahib Ji. I don't think that your knowledge of Sikhi, your connection with Guru like Vaheguru is based on your age.
All right, Gurjot?
Well, they basically cover all my points.
Okay.
But yeah, just this thing that it doesn't matter what age you are, but anyone who follows the Guru's Hukum, who follows the Guru's teaching should be eligible. But back to something that Sahej said. So you said that someone doesn't have to be Amritdhari and they don't have to follow Guru Granth Sahib, but they can still be elected, right?
Not necessarily. I did say that there are people who consider themselves Sikhs that do not follow the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, and I believe their voices deserve to be heard.
So then what's the point of Guru Granth Sahib Ji? Because the Sikhs have to unquestionably follow what
Right,
Guru
well,
Granth Sahib said.
To me, I don't think it matters whether or not we believe that they're Sikhs or not. The point of the matter is they believe they're Sikhs, they believe they're part of the Qaum, and thus they should have a part in the Sarbat Khalsa.
Okay.
All right, Divakar?
You just said that they unquestionably follow Guru Granth Sahib. Okay, we were saying that about Rahat Maryada too. Why don't we unquestionably follow Rahat Maryada?
Because
Go ahead,
it's not a
Sahejkar
guru.
and then Gurjot Singh.
Right, like Gurjot Singh said.
It's not a guru, yeah.
Yeah, the Granth Sahib Ji is written by our Gurus. The Rahat Maryada, again, like we said, is a guideline. It's not a substitute for Guru Granth Sahib.
Okay. We're going to move on to our next question. That next question will be directed to Sahejkar. This one, I think, is kind of an overarching question for something we have touched on a little bit, but I want to give you an opportunity to really coalesce some of your thoughts behind this in response. So my question is this, if the goal at the end of the day is your relationship with the Guru, and so at its core is really this understanding of spirituality, do we really think that spiritual awareness mandates a code of conduct? Isn't that kind of a code self-limiting and somewhat self-defeating of a strategy? I bring this up because this is something that has been posed by Professor I.J. Singh, and he's ideated a little bit about this, and I think it's actually very pertinent to bring up now because in extension of that, why not just let everyone go for what works for them, right? If you consider yourself a Sikh, you believe in the teachings of the Sikh gurus, you follow the Guru Granth Sahib, the 10 gurus and all of that, why not do what works for you in a manner that seems suitable, as long as at the end of the day, our goal remains universal connectivity and a healthy relationship with the Guru? Right.
So the thing is, I don't think so obviously the Rahat Maryada is a set of guidelines, correct? However, Sikhi is one of the only religions that really allows for like the interreligious like conversation. Even with you can say like Baba Namdev Ji, no one can say that he wasn't connected to Vaheguru, right? So Your question was how does spiritual awareness, sorry, could you repeat it?
Yeah, so basically the core of the question is how does spirituality and does spiritual awareness, does it require a code of conduct? How can we put rules and regulations around spirituality and spiritual relationships with the guru?
Okay, so I think one important distinction to make is that rather than rules and regulations, it is guidelines, because of course everyone should have their individual pathway to Vaheguru, right? However, some people do not, either they don't have the time, either they don't have the ability. It's very hard to just come up with that in your own life like that, right? So if someone needs help on how to get to Vaheguru, this is a set of guidelines that can help like a larger community. And if you don't want to follow that, that is one thing, of course. But I mean, in the end, it is an individual process, but that doesn't mean that everyone else has the or everyone in the world has the capability of getting there by themselves. So that's why Sangat is important as well.
Okay, Gursne?
I agree with Sehaj. I think uniformity is important for any organization, not just Sikhism as a religion. I think for any type of organization, uniformity is important to keep an organization going. However, I do think Sikhism is a very inclusive religion, and whether or not you think that following the Rehat Maryada gets you on the path to the Guru or not, that's up to you. That's a personal choice. For example, if I think not wearing a kara will help me go to the Guru, that's fine. That's my personal choice. If I think wearing a kara will take me to the Guru, that's fine. That's my personal choice. It's all about how I interpret Gurbani. It's all about how you personally interpret Gurbani.
Anyone else have any thoughts here? Divakar?
I know I mentioned this a couple times, as it's, and we're back to the spiritual part, that it's more of a guidance on like spiritual discipline, and it's not like, oh, you have to do this. It's more of a spiritual thing, and it's like you can follow this if you want, but like there's stuff like Nam Simran and Seva and Nitnem. Like people sometimes don't have time for Nitnem in the mornings. That's fine, but that doesn't mean you just should like be like, oh, that's not important as part of our religion.
Any other thoughts before we move forward? All right. Okay, our final question is going to be, of course, for Divakar. And this one may be a little long-winded, but at the core of it, you know, something that we've also touched on, because you guys have done a very good job of really exploring a lot of the issues with the Rehat Maryada, as well as a lot of the necessities therein. And so I'm curious to know, you know, when we talk about inclusivity and when we talk about Sikhi being a universal faith, being a universal religion, being a universal understanding of the divine creator, we obviously have been told, and it's even, I think, very beautifully mentioned in the Rehat Maryada itself. I think the part that stands out to me the most is that there's particular mention of the fact that Khalsa should be distinct from all other faiths, but it should not hurt the feelings of any person belonging to another faith. Which, if that's not really the core principle of Sikhi, I don't really know what else is. And that's my personal perspective here. But I found myself in awe of how beautifully that kind of wraps up what I think a Sikh is. At the same time, there are mentions, again, a little bit of the irony here, there are mentions of who can or cannot be in the Panch Pyare, and I was surprised to see that it mentions disabled people cannot be representative in the Panch Pyare. If you are blind or you have a chronic illness, which as a physician, I can tell you about 80% of our population has chronic illnesses. And I can promise you that many of the Panch Pyare that we have locally representing us do have chronic medical conditions. And then it mentions things like you should not keep the sangat of someone who once kept their hair and then cut their hair. Or you should not keep the sangat of someone who has committed any of the 4 kurahets, okay, which is a completely separate conversation about why those are the 4 kurahets and you know, somehow represent the worst things that you could do as a Sikh, but doesn't reference things like rape or murder or things like that. But I guess my question is, if we are aiming to be such an inclusive faith and such a universal faith, how do we reconcile these parts of the Rehat Maryada? How do we find a way to believe what the Rahat Maryada is saying and truly think that that is part of our guideline while remaining inclusive and allowing people of other folds and other choices and other paths to God to remain in our Sangat. How do we do that? Okay. And again, you can take a second because I know I put a lot out there, so don't feel like you have to immediately respond, but tell me what you think.
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, so really the question is, how do we, there's so many things that tell us in the Rahat Maryada that you shouldn't, you know, keep Sangat of X, Y, or Z type of person, or certain people shouldn't be allowed to do X, Y, or Z in the Sikh faith. How are we going to be inclusive? How are we going to let people really come into the Sikh faith? If we keep putting up barriers, if we keep putting up boundaries, and if we keep setting standards that not necessarily everyone may meet.
Okay, I know we mentioned this earlier. That's why we're saying it should be revised more as a current thing. Like you mentioned that they don't let disabled people or blind people or people that have any illnesses be on anything that represents us, but then that doesn't follow what we say. That's equality for all. That doesn't show our equality. When we say equality for all based on gender, race, religion, or anything like that, that also means for people who are disabled or blind, which is why I'm saying it should be updated based on our current standards. Because if someone comes in and they represent all of Sikhi, they read the Bani, they understand it, but the thing is that they're in a wheelchair, but then there's another candidate who's there who doesn't represent anything, but they have everything else. Why should we pick the one who's not disabled? Which is why I think it should be updated in the case that we should just be equal for all.
All right, Sahaj Kaur and then Gurjot Singh.
I do agree with Diwan. I think like I said in my opening, 1930s, 1940s, this was a very culturally and politically different time than now. I think now we focus a lot more on including the parts of society that have been shunned or communities in society that have been shunned for so many years. So the thing about blind people, about disabled people, I think at that time, their thought process may have been a panch pyara has to be tyaar bar tyaar, right? And that is a core principle of Sikhi. But who's to say that someone who's blind can't be tyaar bar tyaar, right? I think these were things that weren't taken into account at that time, and that is exactly why the Rahat Maryada should be revised.
Gurjot?
I agree with that, but then whenever I think of these amendments or changes, I always think, who are we to see if this is fit or not? The gurus were the ones who wrote Guru Granth Sahib and think they're fit. These values were fit. So basically all I think is that any changes that need to be made, like the disabled thing you were mentioning, that should be definitely changed because of how Guru Nanak said everyone should be equal. But any changes need to reflect the Bani and the meaning of Guru Granth Sahib Ji. There shouldn't be anything that goes against it, or anything that if there's not a direct saying, or if there's not anything in Guru Granth Sahib that says you can do so and so, it shouldn't be reflected in Rahat Maryada. It should be only in accordance to Guru Granth Sahib.
So Gursnekar, and before you have something to say, I just want to give anyone the opportunity. Does anyone want to defend? So Divakar mentioned, and you guys kind of elaborated on this as well, those things about being disabled and that should not be included. And Sahajkar, you kind of gave us the reasoning for that, especially as a warrior class, why we wanted certain people who were physically capable. Does anyone want to defend the fact that that should remain in the Rahat Maryada? All right. We'll take it. Go ahead, Gursnekar.
Okay, I wanted to say that one thing that I think could help is revising the language. I think I said this before, but there's many examples in the Rahat Maryada where it states oh, my daughter, if someone murders my daughter, I won't be with them, I won't be acquaintances with them. And it has a lot of specific language, oh, the bride should sit on the left of the groom, and all this stuff. I think revising the language, because at that time, this doesn't really reflect, I think modern day, what they thought then does not really reflect what we think modern day. One document, since I live here in the US, I'm really familiar with the Constitution. It says we the people. It doesn't specify gender, doesn't specify anything. It says we the people. I think having language, inclusive language like that can be helpful. And also, following the Guru Granth Sahib, equality is preached multiple times in the Guru Granth Sahib, countless times, as well as, so the people that wrote the Rehet Maryada, it's their ideals, what they interpreted that are in the Rehet Maryada. It's not what we interpret now in the modern world, which is why I think that representation is important, because the Sangat today is not represented in the Rehet Maryada.
Anyone else have thoughts before I add on a couple of quick addenda here? Okay. If we are, talking a little bit about modern day and social issues that are a part of conversation in these modern times, I want to ask you specifically because the Rehet Maryada also mentions in pretty good detail about the Anand Karaj ceremony. There has been some conversation about why the groom leads the bride in the lama and in the parikrama around the Guru Granth Sahib during that ceremony. Do we think that that still stands today, or that should be altered? And also reflect upon that a little bit if we are discussing the possibility or the option of gay marriage. And is that okay in Sikh faith, and how would we adapt the Anand Karaj for that? So we'll go with Sahajgar and then Gurjot Singh and then whoever else wants to chime in.
I think Anand Karaj, not only whether or not the groom should go in front, I think taking the parkarme, like that is also a really big debate. And again, I know I keep honing down on this point, but I really think it's important to think about the perspective, like the cultural and historical context of the time. At that time, I think it was in their minds, to them, it was really important to make this distinction between a Hindu marriage and a Sikh marriage, right? And not only that, of course, that is one thing, but I also think that a lot of cultural stigmas made their way into the Rehet Maryada. Again, with the groom in front, or the gender-based language, I think this is something that is in Punjabi culture and has been in Punjabi culture. And that is a reason why, it's not on equal level with the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, because even on the topic of gay marriage, the metaphor of the husband and wife is just that, purely a metaphor. It doesn't even pertain to actual people. It pertains to the bride being the soul and the husband being the Vaheguru, right? And that is because that is something that was relevant at the time. Gay marriage was not as big of a deal back then as it is now. But in my personal belief, gay marriage is no different than straight marriage. If a person is gay, they don't choose that. And the whole point of Sikhi is that you should be true to yourself, right? That's why we don't cut our hair. That's why we don't get tattoos and stuff.
All right, Gurjot Singh and then Divakar.
Yeah, I agree with what Saj said mainly, but one of the points in Rehet Maryada it starts with a Sikh man and woman. I think that should be changed in order to incorporate any sexuality, any combination of sexuality. Because as Guru Nanak said, everyone is created equal. So I think it goes in direct conflict with what Guru Granth Sahib Ji, and I think that should be changed. But when it comes to intercaste marriage, I don't think a Sikh and a member of a different faith should be allowed to do Anand Karaj in Gurdwara, in presence of Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. I think you can do a wedding wherever you want, but when it comes to Anand Karaj, I think it should be very strict. It should be someone who believes in Sikh values, someone who basically two people who basically believe in the power of Sikhi and that they can essentially together become a Jot with the presence of Vaheguru.
All right, so we'll do Divakar and Gursnekar. You guys can give me your response, and kind of also keep in the back of your mind something that came to me as Gurjot Singh was mentioning his comment here, which is that if two people are saying that they are okay with accepting Sikh principles, is it okay to do an Anand Karaj ceremony for a couple who will then go have a religious ceremony of another faith as well, whether at a church or a Hindu ceremony or a Jewish ceremony? Can they do both, and should that be allowed? Go ahead, Divakar, Gursnekar. Again, you guys can reference whatever you were wanting to say initially, but I also want to bring this up as well.
I'm going to start with what Sahaj said about the gay marriage. The Sikh Rehet Maryada, mostly it stresses the importance of a committed and loving relationship between two individuals rather than just a woman and a husband. I think anyone should be able to get married, regardless if it's a man or a woman, or it could be both, because it's not about what their gender is. It's more about how much they love each other and that they're supporting each other with spirituality. And to what Gurjot said about non-Sikhs not being able to do Anand Karaj, I disagree with that. I think I think the most important thing is that the respect between the two people getting married. If one's Sikh and one's Hindu, if the Hindu one supports the Sikh person, I don't think it should matter whether the person's Sikh or not.
Okay, so we'll go to Gursnaik Kaur, then Sahaj Kaur, and then Gurjot Singh.
Okay, about the homosexual marriage, I do agree the language should be adjusted to incorporate homosexuality, gender fluidity, other things to do with gender. On the Anant Garj, how can you determine who's a Sikh? Who are you to say this is a Sikh, this is not a Sikh? How can you say that? How can you determine who's who? And then additionally, I think anyone should be able to get married. The whole point of an Anant Garj is that you're joining with another person to be on the path to the Guru. If a non-Sikh person does that, I think that's fine. As long as you're respectful to the Guru, I think it's fine. It's your personal decision, that's your choice. I don't think anyone has the right to judge anyone based on who they want to get married to, whether they want an Anant Garj. That's their decision, that's their choice.
All right, so we'll do Sahaj Kaur, Gurjot Singh, Diwa Kaur, and then we'll move forward to closing statements.
All right, so I am about the marrying outside of your religion. I am a little conflicted. On one point, I do agree with Gurjot Singh. I don't think they should be allowed to be married, that's fine, but hypocrisy is one thing that is very clearly emphasized in Guru Granth Sahib Ji. If you're doing an Anand Karaj, you're submitting yourself as a couple, as one joint soil to Waheguru. And you're reading the Lama while you do it. The Lama specifically state the Sikh way of life in the context of marriage. So I don't understand how someone can have a Sikh way of life if one person is not Sikh, right?
Exactly.
That's not to say that I would judge someone who marries someone outside of their religion. I do believe it is personal choice, and I do believe that if someone wants it to happen, it should be allowed to happen. But having two marriages, one based on one religion and one based on the other, is hypocritical, and it goes against what the Lama say.
Yeah, exactly. What said, so the lava is supposed to reflect the Sikh way of life. So we're not doing an Anant Karj for respect between two individuals, as what Diva said that we're doing. But basically, Anant Karj is for the people to get closer to Sikhi, closer to their Guru. So it doesn't matter. How does it make sense for someone who follows a different God, a different way of belief, a different belief system? How does it make sense for them to be included in Anant Karj? Or why do they even do Anant Karj if they're following they don't believe in Waheguru, they don't believe in Guru Granth Sahib, they don't believe in the values that we as Sikhs believe in. So what's the point of Anant Karj and if they don't believe in it?
Okay, I want to say something that Gurjot said earlier. You mentioned that you said equality for all. If it's equality for all, what does it matter if one person's Sikh and one person isn't, as long as they respect each other or they love each other? And you also brought up lava and how it's just a Sikh thing. And yeah, it is a Sikh thing, but it's more of it represents a spiritual stage of married life, and it ends with just the bride and groom realizing their destinies as just one person. And I do have a quote for this. It's from the fourth lava. It says, Har chotri lav man sahaj baya har paya balaram jio. In the fourth round of marriage ceremony, my mind has become peaceful. I found the Lord. It's not saying, hey, we have to be Sikh to get married. It ends up with saying, we love each other, we're together now. It doesn't matter if one person's Sikh and one person's not Sikh.
I do.
All right, so unfortunately, only because we're running close on time, so I'm going to let Gursnaik speak only because she had already spoken by the time I said I was going to be wrapping up, but unfortunately I'm going to have to cap it there. So Gursnaik Kaur, and then we'll go on to closing statements.
Okay. A marriage in Sikhism is about joining together to go on the path of Guru together. This person that you're marrying is helping you on your path to the Guru. So if this person, no matter if they're Christian, Muslim, Hindu, whatever, if they're helping you go to the Guru, it doesn't matter who they are. They could not be Sikh and have similar core values. They could be like, oh, Naam Japna, Kirt Karna. They could have the same values, they could have different values. If they are helping you on the path to the Guru, they're helping you be a better Sikh. This is your personal decision, this is you. This is not anyone else's decision. This is what you interpret of the Guru Granth Sahib. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. This is you. So if this person is helping you go to the Guru, this person is helping you in your Sikh life, I think it's fine.
All right, so now we're going to move forward to the closing statements. And of course, again, I apologize if I wasn't able to get to you. If you have any pertinent or burning comments that you would like to make, please feel free to incorporate those into your closing statement. I would like you to please keep those as close to 90 seconds as possible, just so that we can, again, kind of wrap things up in a timely fashion. But we will be starting first closing statement by Sehejgar.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So in today's debate, we've obviously heard a lot about revising the Raat Maryada, updating the Raat Maryada, and of course, as we've seen today, I do agree with this. One of the points that I would make is it's really important to cross-reference it with Gurbani. I think just focusing on solutions moving forward, right? I think it's important to cross-reference it with Gurbani to make sure that we aren't letting our cultural stigmas and personal stigmas into the Raat Maryada again, right? And I do think it's important to host these kinds of Gurmate like every 30 years, every 50 years, regularly, right? But moving on to solutions that are more immediate and more logical to do right now, I think we talked about this in the debate as well. There is a large lack of education on not only the Raat Maryada, but Sikhi as a whole. And I think really this lack of education starts with the youth. And I think like implementing in Khalsa school, incorporating things about the Raat Maryada, how to apply this in your real and daily life is something that can be incorporated into Khalsa school. And it's something that we can do in a Gurdwara as a community, not only with the youth, but I think there should be more connection between adults and between children. Because how a lot of adults expect children to know things that they haven't explicitly stated. And it's just not plausible for them to be able to do that. So I think as a Gurdwara, as a community, we should come together so that this disconnect between the experiences of the new generation and something like the ideals of the Raat Maryada aren't there in the future. Waheguru Ji Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Next closing statement by Gursnekar.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Today we discussed a lot, whether it's revising the Raat Maryada, gender equality, and marriage. I still believe that changes need to be made to the Raat Maryada to protect the Panth. Education and a more representative system can help achieve this goal. An analogy that kind of relates to this is having to do with COVID. A vaccine has to evolve as a virus mutates. So as Sikhs evolve, the Raat Maryada needs to kind of mutate with it. I think that another point is that we have to start the change. We have to be a change agent. I don't think the Raat Maryada is completely to blame. If a change needs to be made, we need to be the ones to start to change it. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
All right, next closing statement will be by Divakar.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. We have learned that the Sikh way of life is guided by the principles outlined in Sikh Raat Maryada and Guru Granth Sahib, and it emphasizes the importance of one God, equality, selfless service, and it's centered around spirituality. But that doesn't mean that not following certain rules of a Sikh Raat Maryada makes me less of a Sikh. It mostly forms the foundation of how we should live our lives, and rather than this is what you have to follow. And I know at the beginning of this, we were talking about what we could do to make this better, and I think education and surrounding yourself with people who also follow the same idea also makes a difference and something that you can do. And overall, the Sikh Raat Maryada is a guide for all Sikhs, and we did mention how it lays down guidelines for marriage and stuff, but this was also, when it was written, it wasn't updated to current culture, and it can be updated to how we live life now. So overall, the Sikh Raat Maryada serves as a guide for Sikhs of all levels, from individual spiritual growth to the functioning of a Sikh community as a whole, and it still does help us stay connected to our faith, maintain our identity, and lead lives that are grounded in the principles of Sikhism. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
And of course, final closing statement by Gurjot Singh.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So I think this was a great discussion, but one thing that I'd like to take out of it, and one thing I'd really like to hammer in on, is that there should never be a disconnect or any conflict between Raat Maryada and Guru Granth Sahib Ji. I think we effectively established that. There's a reason that we as a Khalsa Panth sit below Guru Granth Sahib Ji in Gurdwara. Guru Granth Sahib Ji is the Almighty, and our Guru's Bani, Guru's teachings, that should be the main main way we kind of make these resolutions that we were saying in Rath Maryada. And I think obviously one of the biggest ones for me was the gender inequality that's referenced in the Rath Maryada that I think we should try to incorporate more of Gurbanian. And one of the main things I also want to see incorporated is the increased education, or just kind of breaking through the surface level when you really do kirtan and stuff like that. So I think there's definitely lots of changes to be made within the Rath Maryada, but it all comes down to how we can effectively incorporate Guru Granth Sahib Ji into Rath Maryada better. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
And with that, I think I am reflecting what the majority of the Sangat here is really thinking, is that you guys have had such an inspiring conversation, and I think and hope that it's been fruitful and meaningful to you guys as well. And so for that, just one jakara, Bole Sonehal. And so now, judges, if I can just urge you to at least complete your score sheets in the next few seconds so that Diwan can grab those from you to at least tabulate. So we'll give you guys, a couple of minutes, but I just want to, again, emphasize that you can keep making comments on your paperwork, but the actual numerical scores, if you can at least finalize that, so that we can start to tabulate the results and have them prepared in a timely fashion in order to present awards in just the next little bit. So again, at least the numerical scores, if you can complete that, and then feel free to continue to make comments on separate papers going forward. And then I will also, for the next about 10 minutes or so, I'll open up some conversation for the Sangat. So if there's any Sangat member that has questions that they would like to ask, this is kind of the opportunity to invite you to do so. And again, I'm going to re-emphasize that this portion is not included in the scored evaluation of our participants and does not go into any sort of interpretation of the final results, but this is just for the purposes of, I'm sure people have some burning questions that they would like to ask. So I'm going to kind of turn around. If you are able to stand and project your voice and ask your question, that would be ideal. If for any reason we're unable to hear the question, I'll try to repeat it myself up here so that we can hopefully prevent a little bit of back and forth of having to move folks over. So if anybody has a question, feel free to stand up and ask. Yeah, please, Uncle. You can stay seated if you want. That's fine. You're in the front.
So Gurjot was talking about no non-Sikh should be married in Gurdwara. Okay. So in Chicago, my neighbors, they both are Hindu. They got married in Gurdwara. And I was kind of wondering. So my father came from Pakistan, Rawalpindi.
Yeah.
So in Rawalpindi, there were no Gurdwara. The Gurdwara, the word itself, is a coined word later in life. So there used to be something called dharamshalas. That's what I asked my dad. And dharamshalas were, they put Guru Granth Sahib in the middle, and they all had Hindu statues around them. And you can verify people, Hindus and Sikhs who are living in Pakistan, they still have those kind of arrangements. And so my question is, so Guru Granth Sahib Ji, we are trying to make it so exclusive, that is our, and we are eliminating others. There were Muslims who used to keep kirtan also, right? Why you need to know Bani? Because you are trying to connect to Bani, right?
Yep.
Why we have to do that? And I don't think our direction should be where we are excluding ourselves like that. I think personally, if I were to build every Gurdwara, I would like to build it like Dharamshala.
Yeah, I mean, for me, honestly, inclusivity is the main thing in Sikhi. I do agree with a lot of your points, but when it comes to Anand Karj, that's the one thing where I don't see a point for anyone who's not Sikh, who doesn't follow the Sikh values or doesn't believe that Anand Karj can get them closer to Sikhi. There's no point in them doing Anand Karj then, because what's the point if you don't believe that Anand Karj is going to get you closer to the Guru?
Yeah, I just want to make a point. I don't think it's about excluding people from Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Yes, of course, there were, even in Guru Gobind Singh Ji's court, there were Muslims who did Kirtan, right? That's not the point. Two separate points I want to make. One of them, the Anand Karaj thing, is more about the Lama, because the Lama and in Guru Granth Sahib Ji, it specifically states how Sikhs should act in a marriage. And I personally, you may disagree, that's fine, but I think it's hard for when you want to be a Sikh, when you want to follow those things, you're going to do Nitnem in the morning, your Panj Baniya, right, and your partner is not going to do that with your kids. It's a bit of a hard situation, and it can work, absolutely, but of course it's not ideal. And then the thing about the doing Kirtan, for me personally, I don't think that people shouldn't be able to do Kirtan. Like, of course that should be allowed. My point was that Harmandir Sahib is essentially a global stage, and at that point, that there should be at least one preserved area where Sikhs do Kirtan, right? And of course there's guest kirtanis, of course there's stuff like that. I'm not saying it shouldn't be allowed, but it shouldn't be made like a normal thing.
Yeah, but so here's, Bhai Mardana's lineage and Bhai Mardana were
Right.
also allowed to do Kirtan
Absolutely,
at Guru Granth
yeah.
Sahib, so,
Right.
Harmandir Sahib.
Right, right.
I just want to say one thing. I don't think there's any difference, whether it's Harmandir Sahib, whether it's any Gurdwara. I don't think there's any difference between any Gurdwara. I think all Gurdwaras should be equal. They're all the same. It's the same thing, same Sangat, same Sikhs. Everything's the same. With the marriage, I know a couple, when the wife is a Sikh and the husband is like this white Christian dude, and he goes to the Gurdwara, he takes the kids to the Gurdwara, he encourages his kids to go to Khalsa school, he encourages his kids to do Nitnem. I don't think it's right to say that, oh, just because they're not Sikh, they won't encourage Sikhism. They
Right,
could-
that's not what I'm saying. I also know many people. My own cousin is Sikh and married to a Hindu. But I think the point of the matter is the Lama, it's the Gurbani in itself. Like, how are you going to commit to a Sikh way of life if you're not a Sikh?
Exactly.
Well, I
They're
mean-
not going to wake up and do Nitnem in the morning.
I mean, if you want to do like a marriage in legal circumstances, there's literally no problem. And I know some people who may identify as Christian or Hindu aren't like religious or anything, but I think in the context of like a religious setting, I don't think it's ideal.
Well, I know
Okay,
people
alright.
that say that they're Sikhs and don't do Nitnem in the morning. I'm a Sikh. I don't do Nitnem every morning. So does that mean I can't get in a Nandkaraj?
And how are you gonna tell someone they can't do it because they're not sick? Who are you gonna say who's sick and who's not?
All right, I'm gonna see if there's anyone else in the Sangat that has a question. Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, I think back yourself, if not each other, yourself. I think you guys did a good job. I don't imagine myself debating like this when I was young, so good job. Although I think we talked about Rath Maryada a lot, right? We talked about software updates. I would take Rath Maryada as a software update, right? 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, what's that right version? Like 5-year plan, 10-year plan? I think we should have. Like we have not updated it for almost like, 90 years? Right? So what is that era? What is that decade we are looking at? I think 10 years is probably a good mark. Generation changes every 5 years, generation gap. What do you guys think?
I mean-
You cannot change that Maryada every other year.
Yeah.
Right? It has to be certain guidelines.
Honestly, I think even 10 years is too little.
Yeah, I
I don't think like new social issues, well, of course they pop up every day, but like the main organized ones, I think it would be better to focus it around like 20, 30 years, where if it's every 10 years, someone who is like 40 in the time will be 50 in the time, they'll have the same opinions, or they're able to make their same point. If we ensure it's like 20, 30, 40 years later down, a new generation is coming, right? And they're definitely much more aware with their problems.
Yeah, I mean, humanity is ever changing. 100 years in the future, you're going to find some new values or some new issues that we, like that we brought up today, but there are going to be new, different values, new issues. So it's ever changing. You can't put like a specific time frame on when the final Red Maryada should be like established or something like that. There's no time frame.
I want to say that I do not agree with, I think every 10 years is fine, or every 10 years or as needed. If something arises, I think it's important that the calls have a way to meet in a random situation that something important happens. Additionally, I do not agree that, in the 10 years I'll have the same opinion. Right now, I'm 18, I'm able to vote. I believe that when I'm 28, I'll have different views because I'll have different life experiences. I think in these 10 years, a lot of things could happen. I might get married, I might have kids, and my world perspective might change. So I think your
Right.
perspective changes.
I also disagree with your fact. It's been about, as you said, about 90 years since they had last updated, and look how much our views have changed. So I don't think we should wait that long length of time before it's updated again. Things change every day, all right? So I think a good time set would be about 10 years, because if we wait another 30, 40 years, we're going to be in the same position we are right now.
I agree. I think we should change it every 10 years, as you say. I'm just saying there's no like end to the Red Meriada and its growth and its boundaries. There's no boundaries to basically like what we can put in the Red Meriada. I agree though. We should do it every 10 years or so.
All right, Uncle, I know you have another question. Let me just quickly make sure, let me just see if there's anybody else that has, I just want to make sure. All right, wonderful. We have a lot of people who have questions. I like that.
One question and then otherwise you will not.
All right, it's your wife who wants to ask a question, so I don't know.
I just have the question for the girls here. As women, why have we been okay with this, and why have we been so complacent with changing this? Even now, I feel that this discussion will happen, and then we're not going to revisit it for God will know till when. As women, this is so stacked against us. Why the complacency? Why?
Jupin, can I go use the restroom?
Go for it. Yeah, please. Any of y'all, if you need to get up, take a break during this, please feel free. And plus, clearly this is pertinent to the girls here.
I actually don't think we've been complacent. I think that the way that our culture has organized itself is no matter what we do, this is not just in Punjabi culture, this is in like social culture as a whole. A woman's opinion in society does not have as much weight as a man's opinion. So regardless of whether or not we've been complacent, a whole group of women could organize something, right? But the fact of the matter is that men are in charge. And they were in charge back then, they're in charge even now. So
What have we even tried? You say we can get together and try, but what have we even tried? At any level, at this Gurdwara's level, at any level, can you name any initiative taken by women, or we've taken as women, and I'm including myself in this craziness because I read this and I'm like, oh my God, like, what are we even complaining about? I've not done anything about this to change it.
do y'all have anything to say or should I?
I think one thing that's important is education. Before this, I didn't know much about the Red Maryada. I didn't know there was gender-specific language in it. I just assumed because the Guru Granth Sahib is not like that, I assumed the Red Maryada is not like that. Also, representation. I'm assuming all the pictures I've seen of the Sarbat Khalsas, most of it's men. I think representation of women is important. And I think one thing that you said was, what did you say about women not taking a stance?
Being complacent, like we have been okay with this. Like, okay, as Jupin asked the question, the groom leads the bride, we've been okay with it, right?
I think
We've not protested that. At this Gurdwara, I have not seen a wedding where the bride led the groom.
I think there's Jurassic Med. One thing that I think of is Rosa Parks sitting in the back of the bus, stuff like that. And I have seen weddings where I think I saw it on some Instagram page where a girl led the guy and they both had kirbans. So I think there are changes being made, but something like Sej said, I don't think they're all being heard.
Yeah, I really don't think it's fair to say women have been complacent because me personally, I have not been complacent. And I know a lot of my friends, a lot of women who wear the stars have not been complacent. And I think this question itself, why are women complacent? I think it's based in internalized misogyny because if the system itself does not allow women to take stands for themselves, it's not their fault if they've been trained from childhood to accept these things, to accept that this is how it is.
Right there. I don't think
Right.
that's misogyny. It's like, it's a martyr complex. Like, no one will listen to me, so let me not do anything anyway, right?
Right, that's not the internalized misogyny part. I think blaming women for being complacent is based in internalized
We
misogyny.
are blaming others. It's not that we are blaming anyone's blaming us. I think as women, we are blaming others.
Okay.
All right, I like all these conversations.
So my question is, we have this, on a software, going back to the software analogy.
Yeah.
We have a US version of software and an Asian version of software because they are two different societies. They have two different thinking processes and all that. So why we want to unify Rat Maryada based on people living in India or any other place which have a different social structure, different thought process? Because then people in India are extremely opposite to gay marriages. doesn't matter you're a Hindu, Sikh or anything. Their culture and sociology is when they're understanding it, right? So, but why we want to unify rag together with a group of people who don't even value our system?
I get what you're saying, but it's also like what we were saying about like the majority. Just because people still think that doesn't mean majority of people don't. Culture has grown. 90 years ago, gay marriage was not a thing. People were like, why are we doing this? But if we move forward to current culture, there's so many people who are gay and get married, and I don't think it's something that
regarding the non-Sikh marriage in Gurdwara. So we are coming from, you did proper yourself, okay? I'm just going, okay? So when Guru Amar Das Ji started the langar, they said everybody has to be equal sitting together. And we say like, come, when, let's say a guy choose a girl, bringing in a family, taking acceptance of the family. Why can't we say when we're trying to get the lava, let's give a chance to the person towards the guru. Let the connection between the guru and the person, if they go through or not. Why we can't give a chance?
So, I mean, first of all, in my opinion, langar and lava are two monumental. There's completely different things. But and I do agree in the equality thing that you said. If someone wants to turn to the Sikh way of life, follow the Guru's banis, and go in accordance with another entity. And what's the point of an Anandkarj if you're at that point?
I just want to say, like, what do you qualify to be a Sikh? If you're saying only Sikhs can get married by a Nankarj, what do you qualify
Someone
to be a
who
Sikh?
follows and believes in the
How are you
teachings of
going to
Guru
know if
Granth
they
Sahib.
follow it or not? Are you going to go up to them and are you going to be like, do you follow this?
No, if they believe, I mean, if they believe in it or not, there's nothing. There's
How
really
would
nothing.
you know if they believe in it?
They-
All right,
they'll
see,
say
the
it.
thing is, the point is not about Anand Karaj or even marriage in general. It's about the Gurbani, the Lama or
Exactly.
Gurbani. It's not about get married. That's not the point. Get married, and an interreligious marriage can very well flourish. Absolutely, I've seen it in my own personal experience. The point is the Lama, the Gurbani. It is very hypocritical to say you're going to accept Gurbani, that you're going to submit yourself in front of Guru Granth Sahib Ji and take on this Bani, implement it into your life when you have no intention of doing that because you don't even believe in that religion. And of course, some Sikhs, they won't implement the Lama in their Gurbani or in their life, but they are Sikh, at least that intention is there that, yes, this is something I fully intend on doing, even if I don't, implement that in its entirety.
I think having the core values of a Sikh is more important than calling yourself a Sikh. I think that being a good person, being honest, being good, working hard, I think that's way more important versus some random who's calling themselves a Sikh and like doing crazy stuff all the time.
The core values of the Sikh include believing in Guru Granth Sahib Ji.
Exactly. Yeah. You can have all the core values you want, but at the end of the day, if you don't believe in what Almighty that
Right.
we all believe in the Guru's Bani, then there's no
I mean,
point.
the Guru's Bani talks all about inclusivity.
Right, but even in the Guru's Bani, it specifically states you can do good karam, you can be a good person, but if you don't have naam behind those karams, you're not a good Sikh. That doesn't get you to Vaheguru.
All right, we all already have, okay, so I actually have two people that have questions, and then I'll have you, and then we can end it. All right. All right, Resham in the back.
Okay, so like I said in the debate, okay, well, first of all, I don't think any of us stated that non-Sikhs should not do kirtan, so I just want to make that really clear right now. And another thing for the Rath Maryada, I stated this before too. Again, it's a guideline, and it's for a large majority of Sikhs, not all Sikhs. And so it is something that if someone doesn't know how to individually reach Vaheguru, this is something they can follow. But that does not take away from people who have their own separate paths to Vaheguru. Again, no one else can judge your relationship with Vaheguru, right? You know if you're doing something that's right or wrong. If you fully, like even with Baba Namdev Ji, he fully believed that the idol had Vaheguru in it, that he would eat, right? That's why he's in the Sakhi. That's why he sat there for hours and hours waiting for the idol to eat, right? In his mind, he wasn't hypocritical about it. He believed that Vaheguru was there, and that is his connection to Vaheguru. None of us can judge that, right?
All right, we'll move on to the next question. Rev Giran.
Okay, so I kind of have two questions. One is how much inclusivity and how much change is too much? Because I know you guys acknowledge that uniformity is important for a group of people, or else they're going to stray away and not, I guess, be or have the qualities of that group anymore, right? So how much change is too much? Where do you draw the line for that?
Well, I don't think the right word is change. I think for inclusivity, for example, langar, anyone can come eat langar. Sit on the floor, everyone's equal. I think in the same perspective, anyone can come into the Diwan hall if they believe and respect in the Guru. They can do kirtan. They can do anything. If they're learning about Sikhism, they can come to the Gurdwara, learn about Sikhism. I think inclusivity doesn't necessarily mean change. It means including people into our Sangat, letting people learn, letting people participate, and yeah.
All right, I'm going to wrap this up here. I know that there's a lot of other questions and a lot of people that had their hands raised, so I apologize to any members of the Sangat who didn't get to ask their questions here publicly, but I am going to offer these participants up. So afterwards, if you can catch them somewhere and you want to ask them a question, please feel free to do so directly. But I will let the four of you loose so you can sit comfortably and take a nice deep breath. You guys did wonderfully, so we really appreciate your involvement and your willingness to participate in this debate. So thank you very much for that. And then I'm going to pass it over so we can hopefully get awards finished. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Feel free.
I just wanted to say the participants did wonderfully well. You guys are amazing. But a big jaikara for our wonderful moderator here. We could not have done this without you, Jupin. So, Bole So Nihal. Good job.
Thank you, Auntie Ji.
So, since is our Bhai Sahab here? ਚਲੋ ਉਹ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਨੇ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਇਹੀ ਡਿਮਾਂਡ ਸੀਗੀ ਹਾਂਜੀ ਠੀਕ ਹੈ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਇਹੀ ਡਿਮਾਂਡ ਸੀਗੀ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਪੀਜ਼ਾ ਬਾਅਦ 'ਚ ਖਾਣਾ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਅਵਾਰਡ ਸੈਰੇਮਨੀ ਹੋਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਆ ਸੋ ਹੁਣ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਮੇਰੀ ਥੋੜੀ ਜੀ ਛੋਟੀ ਜੀ ਡਿਮਾਂਡ ਇਹ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਅਰਦਾਸ ਨਾਲ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਅਰਦਾਸ ਨਾਲ ਫਿਨਿਸ਼ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਅਵਾਰਡ ਸੈਰੇਮਨੀ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ 5 ਮਿੰਟ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਅਰਦਾਸ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਰੁਕ ਜਾਓ ਫਿਰ ਪੀਜ਼ਾ ਖਾਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਭੱਜ ਲਿਓ ਸੋ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਹੁਣ ਸਾਡੇ ਰਿਜ਼ਲਟਸ ਸਾਰੇ ਤਿਆਰ ਨੇ 4th ਗਰੁੱਪ ਦੇ ਜੱਜਿਸ ਸੀਗੇ sorry not fourth first group the judges sige let me see Navneet Kaur Harchint Singh Ratanjot Singh anybody here I think everybody left anyway I'm gonna ask one of you judges do the first group and one of the 5th group you can do first group come on Rav Kiran. Okay, Jaspreeta, we need your help here. So hardest results that I have to say here is going to be first group, always the first group. Parents, please encourage them. I know they have been sitting here for such a long time. I am going to start with the participant first, and then I go for the 3rd place, 2nd place, and 1st place, okay? And when I take the participant name, so what I did, the way they were picked this morning, that is the way I start. Don't think if your name came first, you were the last one, okay? I want to make sure on that part too. So, let me see. So, I'm going to start from the back. Hold on. ਤੇ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਪਾਰਟਿਸਪੈਂਟਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਮ ਲੈਣੇ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰਾਂਗੀ ਐਂਡ the first participant in group 1 gets the honorary award is Jaslyn Kaur. Jaslyn, come on. ਮੱਥਾ ਟੇਕ ਕੇ ਆ ਜਾਓ ਚਲੋ ਸੋ ਨਿਹਾਲ ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਇਹ ਮੇਰੀ ਹੁਣ ਫਰੈਂਡ ਬਣ ਗਈ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਤੇ ਇਹਨੇ ਸੋਚਿਆ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਮੈਂ ਹੀ ਦਵਾਂਗੀ ਸਭ ਕੁਝ ਐਂਡ ਸੈਕੰਡ ਪਾਰਟਿਸਪੈਂਟ award honorary award is Haneet Kaur. Is she here? Okay, and the next participant award goes to Ashvi Kaur. Sat Sri Akal. participant award, honorary award, goes to Seher Kaur. Sat Sri Akal. Next participant honorary award goes to Vardhan Singh. And I think he spoke in Punjabi too. No, English? Hunar Kaur spoke in Punjabi? Yes. Okay. Is Sat Sri Akal. Next participant honorary award goes to Bandhan Kaur. Okay, chali gayi hai. So next participant honorary award goes to Robin Preet Singh. Sat Sri Akal. Next participant honorary award goes to, this was Sahajpreet, right? Yeah, Sahajpreet Singh. I'm sorry. Robin Preet Singh was the one we just gave. Now next is Sahajpreet Singh. Did we give up? Bole Sat Sri Akal. Next, honorary participant award goes to Naira Kaur. Sat Sri Akal. And the next participant honorary award goes to Jia Kaur. Sat Sri Akal. Next participant honorary award goes to Tanreej Kaur. Tanreej Singh. Kaur? Kaur and Singh, yeah. Okay, gone. She's gone. The next honorary participant award goes to Baj Singh. And Baj Singh, did you speak in Punjabi? Come on, come here. Sat Sri Akal. And the next participant honorary award goes to Hunar Kaur, who also had the Punjabi award too. Sat Sri Akal. And the next participant honorary award goes to Jasmine Kaur. Sat Sri Akal. Third award, third place award goes to Aveer Singh. Sat Sri Akal. Second place award goes to Sahaj Kaur. Sat Sri Akal. And the first place award goes to Sahiba Kaur. Sat Sri Akal. And in this group, first, second, and third will go to the regional competition because we had 18 participants. So remember that, and the regional competition is going to be either on 3rd June or 4th June, and I will let you know in 24 hours what the other regions, other local gurdwaras are thinking about it. So that will be here at Richardson. So that is our first group award ceremony, and now comes the fifth group award ceremony. So the participant, are you all four here? Judges are, Rav Kiran, you are left because Arpinder Penji left. Veer ji, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਆ ਜਾਓ. ਨਹੀਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੇ, ਅਸੀਂ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ 5th group ਚ ਸਾਰੇ ਆ ਜਾਓ. ਹਾਂਜੀ. ਅਰਪਿੰਦਰ ਨੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਮਨਾ ਕਰਤਾ ਸੀਗਾ, ਉਹ ਚਲੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ. ਹਾਂਜੀ, ਆ ਜਾਓ. ਸੋ ਕਿਡਸ, ਇਹ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਹੀ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ, ਆਪਾਂ ਨੇ ਅਰਦਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਸਮਾਪਤੀ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈ, ਐਂਡ ਦੈਨ ਪੀਜ਼ਾ ਇਜ਼ ਰੈਡੀ. ਹਾਂਜੀ. ਸੋ 5th group ਦਾ participant award goes to Diwa Kaur. Sat Sri Akal. And then 3rd place award goes to Gursane Kaur. Sat Sri Akal. 2nd place award goes to Gurjot Singh. Sat Sri Akal. And the 1st place award goes to Sahaj Kaur. Bole So Nihal, Sat Sri Akal. And Sahaj Kaur, I will let you know how many participants are there, and it will be a speech competition, the next one, for the regional. And ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਸਾਡੀ award ceremony ਦੀ ਸਮਾਪਤੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ, and I literally have to say to everybody, all the 1st group participants, parents who have been sitting through the 5th group, I know they are the youngest kids and still you did it. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for so much for your participation, and we cannot do without the participants and without their, especially the parents, right? And again, thanks to the volunteers, judges, and the timekeeper, and the behind the scene who were adding all the numbers, keep adding the numbers again and again. So thank you so much, everybody, photographer, and then the video, just name it, so how many people were participating. So now we are going to end this symposium at local Gurdwara of Richardson by doing Ardas. Bhai Sahib is here, and we will be doing the Ardas, and then after Ardas, we all will go for the langar time. ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਲੱਖ ਲੱਖ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ. ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਗਲਤੀ ਹੋਵੇ ਮਾਫ ਕਰਨਾ. ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ. ਦਾਸ ਹਮਾਰੀ ਜੀਓ ਪਿੰਡ ਤੇਰਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ, ਵਡਿਆਈ ਕੋਈ ਨਾਮ ਨ ਜਾਣੈ ਮੇਰਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ. ਬੋਲੋ ਜੀ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਇੱਕ ਓੰਕਾਰ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ. ਸ਼੍ਰੀ
ਵਾਹ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਭਗਵਤੀ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਪਾਤਸ਼ਾਹੀ ਦਸਵੀਂ ਫਿਰ ਭਗਵਤੀ ਸਿਮਰ ਕੈ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਲਈ ਧਿਆਏ ਫਿਰ ਅੰਗਦ ਗੁਰ ਤੇ ਅਮਰਦਾਸ ਰਾਮਦਾਸੇ ਹੋਈ ਸਹਾਏ ਅਰਜਨ ਹਰਗੋਬਿੰਦ ਨੂੰ ਸਿਮਰੋ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਹਰਿ ਰਾਏ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਹਰਿਕ੍ਰਿਸ਼ਨ ਧਿਆਈਐ ਜੀ ਡਿਠੇ ਸਭ ਦੁਖ ਜਾਏ ਤੇਗ ਬਹਾਦਰ ਸਿਮਰਿਐ ਘਰ ਨੌਨਦ ਆਵੈ ਧਾਏ ਸਭ ਥਾਈ ਹੋਏ ਸਹਾਏ ਦਸਵੇਂ ਪਾਤਸ਼ਾਹ ਗੁਰੂ ਗੋਬਿੰਦ ਸਿੰਘ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜੀ ਸਭ ਥਾਈ ਹੋਏ ਸਹਾਏ ਦਸਾਂ ਪਾਤਸ਼ਾਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਜੋਤ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਗੁਰੂ ਗ੍ਰੰਥ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜੀ ਕੇ ਪਾਠ ਦਰਸ਼ਨ ਦੀਦਾਰ का ध्यान करके बोलो जी पंज प्यारे चार साहिबजादे 40 मुक्ते हठियां जपियां तपियां जिन्हां ने नाम जपिया वन छकिया देख चलाई तेग वाही देख के रिट कीता तिन्हां प्यारां सचारां दी कमाई दा ध्यान तर खालसा जी बोलो जी जिन्हां ਸਿੰਘਾਂ ਸਿੰਘਣੀਆਂ ਧਰਮੇ ਸੀਸ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਬੰਦ ਬੰਦ ਕਟਾਏ ਖੋਪੜੀਆਂ ਲੁਹਾਈਆਂ ਚਰਖੜੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਚੜੇ ਆਰਿਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਚਰਾਏ ਗਏ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਸੇਵਾ ਲਈ ਕੁਰਬਾਨੀਆਂ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਧਰਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਹਾਰਿਆ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਸਵਾਸਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਨਿਭਾਈ ਤਿਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਕਮਾਈ ਦਾ ਧਿਆਨ ਤਰ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਜੀ ਬੋਲੋ ਜੀ ਪੰਜਾਂ ਤਖਤਾਂ ਸਰਬੱਤ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਧਿਆਨ ਧਰ ਕੇ ਬੋਲੋ ਜੀ ਪਿਰਥ ਮੈਂ ਸਰਬੱਤ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਅਰਦਾਸ ਹੈ ਜੀ ਸਰਬੱਤ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਜੀ ਕੋ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ 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 ਚਿਤ ਆਵੈ ਚਿਤ ਅਮਨ ਕਾ ਸਦਕਾ ਸਰਬ ਸੁਖ ਹੋਵੇ ਜਹਾਂ ਜਹਾਂ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਜੀ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਤਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਰਚਿਆ ਰਹਿਤ देख तेग फतेह बिरद की पैज पंथ की जीत श्री साहिब जी सहाय खालसा जी के बोल बाले बोलो जी सिखा नूं सिखी दान केश दान रहत दान विवेक दान विसाह दान भरोसा दान दानस दान नाम दान श्री अमृतसर जी के इशनान चौकियां झंडे बंगे जुगो जुग अटल धर्म का जयकार बोलो जी सिखां दा मानीवा मत उची मत कर आका आप वाहिगुरू है अकाल पुरख अपने पंथ दे सदा सहाई दतार जीओ श्री ननकाना साहब ते होर गुरुद्वारे गुरधाम जिन्हां तो पंथ नूं विछोड़िया गया खुले दर्शन दीदार सेवा संभाल दा दान खालसा जी नूं बख्शो हे निमाणियां दे मान सतगुरु जी आप जी ने कृपा कीती है गरीब नवाज पातशाह सिख यूथ सपोजियम बच्चे सारे रल मिल के सच्चे पातशाह जी बच्चों ने गुरमत सच्चे पातशाह जो तकदीरां कीतियां महाराज सच्चे पातशाह जीओ आप जी दे बच्चों ने गरीब नवाज पातशाह जी ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ प्रकार दे नाल गुरमत तो जाणू करवाया सतगुरु जी कृपा करना सारे बच्चों के सिर ते मेहरां भरिया हथ रखना अपने दरों करो हे महाराज सतगुरु सारे बच्चों नूं असीसां देणियां गुरसिੱਖੀ जीवन बख्शिश करना वड्डियां उमरां करना तंदुरुस्तियां देणियां ते इन्हां दे सारे माता पिता नूं चढ़दी कला बख्शिश करना सच्चे पातशाह जो मांगे ठाकुर अपने ते सोई सोई देवै नानक दास मुख ते जो बोलै इहां उहां सच होवै लख खुशियां पातशाहियां जे सतगुर नदर करे महाराज गुरमत दी दात देना गरीब नवाज पातशाह जीओ विनत होर जे मंगना सिर दुखां दे दुख दे नाम संतोखिया उतरै मन की भुख सच्चे पातशाह सबना दे परिवारां विच घर बारां विच सतगुरु सुख वरताउणा गरीब नवाज पातशाह खालसा पंथ की सदा सदा चढ़दी कला बख्शिश करना जी मुख वाक बख्शिश करके कृतार्थ करो सही प्यारे मेलो जिन्होंने मिल के आप जी का नाम चितावे नानक नाम चढ़दी कला तेरे पाण वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा दोहरा आज्ञा भई अकाल की सब सिखण को हुक्म है गुरु ग्रंथ जी मान्यो जो प्रभु को मिल बोच है राज करेगा खालसा ख्वार हुए सब मिलेंगे ख्वार हुए सब मिलेंगे बोले सो निहाल वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा वाहिगुरु जी की वाहिगुरु साहब जीओ तुमरी शरण तुम्हारी आशा तुम ही सजन सुहेले राखो राखण हार दयाला नानक घर के गोले जिस सिमरत सब किल बिख नासै पितरी होए उधार हो सो हर हर तुम सद ही जापो जाका अंत न पारो। पूता माता की आशीष निमक न बिसरो तुमको हर हर। सदा भजो जगदीश। सतनाम श्री वाहिगुरु साहिब जीओ। धनासरी महला पहला। जियो तपत है बारो बार। तब तब खपे बहुत बेकार। जय तन बाणी विसर जाए। ज्यों पक्का रोगी विल लाए। बहुता बोलन चखण होए। विण बोले जाने सब सोए राव। जिन कन कीते अखी नाक। जिन जेवा दिती बोले तात। जिन मन राखिया अग्नि पाए। वाजै पवन आखे सब जाए। जेता मोह परीत स्वाद। सबा कालख दागा दाग। दाग दोष मोह चलिया लाए। दरगह बैसण नाही जाए। कर्म मिलै आखण तेरा नाओ। जित लग तरना होर नहीं ताऊं। जे को डूबे फिर होवे सार। नानक साचा सर्ब दातार। कर्म मिलै आखण तेरा नाओ। जित लग तरना होर नहीं ताओ। जे को डूबे फिर होवे सार। नानक साचा सर्ब दातार। वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा वाहिगुरु जी की फतेह।
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਇੱਕ ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਵੇਰੇ ਟਰੋਫੀ ਦੇਣੀ ਸੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਗਰੁੱਪ 2 ਦੀ ਬੱਚੀ ਹੈ। ਯੈਸ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਉਹਦਾ ਫਸਟ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਜ਼ ਸੀਗਾ। ਸੋ ਰਵਕਿਰਨ ਇਫ ਯੂ ਕੈਨ ਕਮ ਐਂਡ ਗਿਵ ਹਰ ਦ ਫਸਟ ਪਲੇਸ ਅਵਾਰਡ। ਜਪਜੀ ਕੌਰ ਸ਼ੀ ਹੈਡ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਸਪੀਕਿੰਗ ਅਵਾਰਡ ਐਂਡ ਫਸਟ ਪਲੇਸ ਅਵਾਰਡ। ਆਈ ਐਮ ਸੌਰੀ ਬੇਟਾ ਮੈਂ ਭੁੱਲ ਗਈ। Sat Sri Akal. And I think it's her birthday too today. So, Sat Sri Akal. So, ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਸਾਰੇ ਜਣੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਲੰਗਰ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਚੱਲਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਐਂਡ ਕੱਲ ਦਾ ਦਿਨ ਮੇਰੇ ਕੋਲ ਹੈ ਆਈ ਐਮ ਗੋਇੰਗ ਟੂ ਇੰਡੀਆ। ਸੋ ਕੱਲ ਔਰ ਪਰਸੋਂ ਦਾ ਦਿਨ ਚਲੋ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ 2 ਦਿਨ ਕਰ ਦੇਣੀ ਹੈ। Please ask me for comments between these 2 days and send me the text and write me the kid's name so that I keep one after another and I will be giving you the comments. And all the participants who are going to the regional competition, it's either on Saturday 3rd June or 4th June. I like on Sunday after 2, but let's see what the other gurdwaras say. And ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਜਾਓ ਜੀ ਪੀਜ਼ਾ ਪੂਜਾ ਖਾਓ ਹੁਣ ਜਾ ਕੇ।